every turn of this industry. If you're doing sales, you're going to come upon objections. So we're going to talk about common objections you might hear and how to overcome those. And then lastly, I'm going to give you some resources, online, and organizations as to where you might actually find some of these individuals. So that's a lot. I want you to know that as we get started in this class, some of the information on the screen might just be a few words, and it's going to be heavy me talking. You are welcome to take pictures of screens, write down notes, and take any questions that you might have. This isn't a slideshow or presentation that I share with anyone outside of this, so this is our course. I'm also not actively recording this session, and the reason being is if we ask questions that pertain to you or everything's very specific to this class, I want to keep it very specific. This is your experience, right? This is a live course. Imagine you were in the room with me. We wouldn't be recording it. We wouldn't be going through that process. I'm trying to emulate that here, but doing it on a much smaller scale. Okay, so the types of individuals we're going to talk about today, this is a 2-day course, so you're going to work with me this morning and then tomorrow morning as well. So we're going to discuss owners and managers, we're going to discuss buyers and sellers, and we're going to discuss lease tenants. Tomorrow, we're going to discuss other individuals such as government agencies, and there's 2 other surprises that I think you guys are going to find enjoyable. So these are going to be really the basic primers as we get into it. And I think it's important to start day 1 with these 3. Okay, so building owners and managers. This right here is probably going to be something a lot of us in commercial don't realize how vast of a pool there is to take from. Because in a moment we'll talk about buyers and sellers, right? But when it comes to building owners and managers, what we don't realize is they look and they feel and they smell and they are so many different types of individuals who fit into this range that unless they just called you and asked you a question, you may not even know they exist. And so over the years, as I've done this inspection industry, a lot of what we have cultivated as a company, not CCPA as much as my other company, Focus. Focus Building Inspections is another company that I operate. It is my commercial company in 4 states. So if you hear me reference my company, I might be referencing that in these conversations, not so much CCPIA. But in Focus in my company, I didn't know I could do things until someone just called me and said, I have a need. Can you do it? And I realized that everybody was wanting the same thing. They were just asking for it in a different manner. So I realized that I didn't have to cultivate and create something new necessarily, the process as you would for everybody. It's just I had to deliver the message a little bit differently. So with building owners and managers, this is probably one of the top client types that I have in my business. I realized that once we looked at our figures, we probably only had 10% of our clients actually buying and selling property. The remainder of them were building owners and managers and then government. So you're going to find that even in an exact area that you are, everybody has a commercial building around you, right? They're either owning it or they're managing it or they're leasing it, anything of that nature like we're talking about today. So these are going to be the people you really want to pay attention to. So there are 3 different types of individuals that we're going to discuss within buying or within building managers and owners. We have the individual owner. Okay, so the individual owner, these are the private individuals. They're the ones that might be a small business as well. Their priorities are going to be focused more on protecting their investment, right? Managing maintenance costs, ensuring long-term property values. And they're typically going to appreciate you giving them very clear, actionable insights from inspections so that they can guide their decisions of owning that property and managing it. Okay? Now, I will preface this before I get into it. You're going to hear me talk a lot about compliance and cost. And while those things are extremely important with your job as a commercial inspector, these are going to be outside of the ComSop. Okay, so if you're following Section 6 of the ComSop or the reporting section of the ComSop, you might find that cost to cure and even accessibility or some compliance might be outside of the scope of what we teach at the base. But I believe firmly that these are all things that you need to understand. You need to understand with building owners. you need to understand how they operate business, right? So for myself, I got really good at doing schools and churches, small business strips, because I really set out to determine how these individuals run their business, how they run their finances, what affects them and the bottom line most, who are all the players involved. I really found that out, and it helps me be a better inspector, but also I can do a lot better at sales because I know that. So make sure that you are prepared for whatever lane you want to run down. You really understand that building type and the people who use it. It will set you apart. Okay, the second type is going to be property managers. Okay, so property managers, property management groups, things of that nature. These are going to be people who are hired to manage commercial properties on behalf of the owners. So they're usually responsible for, coordinating maintenance and handling all the tenant issues and ensuring buildings remain compliant with safety and building codes. Inspection reports are probably going to help them plan for maintenance and reduce liability and maintain all the satisfaction needed so they can keep the tenants there. And they're going to value inspectors who are going to be detail oriented and provide clear documentation. So something like this would be considered like a multifamily property. Multifamily properties are often ran by a property management group. So if you ever go to an apartment that maybe you are renting now or you've rented in the past, most assuredly they have a property management group that is running that facility. So it's not just the owner comes in and sets it up. Very, very rarely does that happen. It does happen, but very rarely will it be the actual owner or their family running the property. It'll probably be some sort of management group. And then another type that I'm going to discuss is going to be real estate investment trusts, or we might refer to them as REITs. So these are companies that are going to own or finance income producing commercial real estate across a range of property sectors. Think big portfolios here. They are often publicly traded entities. They're usually going to have very extensive portfolios, and they're really going to rely on you to assess and give them asset conditions, and you need to be able to support their capital planning because they're all about making money. They're all about data rich reports. They're all about partnering with people who can create scalable content. Okay. So you have three very different individuals here. You have an actual individual. So let's say, for example, this might be like a dentist, right? They just want to be a really good dentist and they just happen to own the building that they're practicing in. That's a great example of a privately owned individual or small business in the building. And then, of course, we discuss what a property management group might look like. Property management groups might be running multifamily. They could also be running shopping centers, strip malls, things of that nature. Often, if it's like a big rent office space, so multifamily or multi-level office building that has different leased individual buildings in it, right? A property management group is most likely running that building. And then, of course, with REITs, there a REIT. In essence, this is a very watered down version. If anyone knows what BlackRock or some of these massive entities that just own everything, right? That's really what they are. They're not owning products as much as they own real estate and all different types of real estate. They have the capital to do it. And these people, like I said, are just concerned mostly with data rich reporting that's going to give them extensive information on capital planning. So you may not be very comfortable with capital planning right now. You may not be very comfortable with talking about numbers and figures and helping people work through their, financial outcomes. We are not acting as a a reserve specialist. So a reserve specialist is somebody who will do the inspection of the property, but they'll also actually evaluate their financial books and outcomes. We're not doing that. We're just doing the inspection. But when you know what type of client you have and you have to mold your inspection report to cater to their bottom line, that's what we're talking about here. We're not actually touching their finances or going through it. Now, you might be third party hired by a company who does reserve studies, and they may have you do the initial, level one and come out and inspect the property and then give them the report. And then they take your quantified data and they make their own reports and assumptions off of it. But very rarely are any of you ever going to be touching finances, nor should you be asking to touch finances. We'll get into leases later, but that might be the only time I actually look at something that is of application would be a lease. But that helps me again understand the responsibility, which we'll talk about, not the finance portion of it. Okay. So when we're talking about these individuals and their key needs, okay, there's three things that I want us to really pay attention to. And that's going to be asset preservation, it's going to be compliance, and it's going to be future planning. Now, again, coming out of the mindset of a home inspector, if you've done home inspections, planning is not something we ever talk about. We just do the inspection and we move on. We're not helping them plan. We're not helping them put reports together. Heaven forbid we even say how much something actually costs, because it's going to come back and probably bite us, because someone's going to get upset that we're talking numbers. In our state, you're not supposed to talk about remediation numbers or things of that nature. Your state might be different, but it's just not part of the lingo. Now, if you come from a background that is all property management, or 'cause some of you have come from property management, some of you have come from asset protection, some of you have come from project management and actually working through repair and remediation projects for large companies. I know a few of you on here do that. And so when it comes to that background, this is going to be second nature to you. But if you're coming from a home inspection heavy background, this is going to be difficult to wrap your head around. We're not recreating the wheel here. We're not doing something that is going to be so outlandish and so difficult that you can't comprehend it and do it. You can do these things easily with confidence once you understand the purpose of it and once you understand your client. Um, with residential, we have things like a master inspector, right? Where you do 1,000 or more inspections, and within InterNACHI, you're considered a master inspector. That's hard to do on the commercial side, because you could do 1,000 commercial inspections, and that might be 1,000 just random inspections. But if you never did a multifamily, or you never did a large office building, or you never did a multi-use functional facility, then you're not really a master. You might be a master at dentist office, but not everything else. It's just like this coming into it. These are things that you're all going to learn, but you're not going to be a master at it no matter the stage. I'm not a master at it, and I've done thousands and thousands of commercial inspections, but I'm really good at a few building types. So, with asset preservation, we want to make sure that they can protect their physical and financial value of the property over time. That's going to be some of their main things. They are operating a building. They need to make sure that they are at least not losing money, but most assuredly making money in that property. And for them, making money may look like not losing money from maintenance issues, right? It's not necessarily where the building is physically making them money, like if they're renting or leasing it out. It's just, if I'm a dentist, I made money on my building this month by not having to spend an egregious amount on the roof or the parking lot or something of that nature. Compliance, we need to ensure the property adheres to local, state, and federal regulations like code and fire, life, ADA. Here's the deal. Again, this goes outside of the scope of practice, but these are all things that you really need to pay attention to and learn and grow in. Whenever I do a school, I really understand with that school what is going to be important for life safety and ADA and fire and code compliance, right? It's a public use facility, and something like life safety or accessibility comes up and it causes an issue. It could be an extremely large litigious event for that organization, and it could cost them a lot of money. So if you already know how these buildings operate, and these tenants operate, and these clients operate, and you know your state and local laws the best that you can, then you are already giving yourself a leg up, not to competition, but just as a trusted advisor. And you'll hear me say this term throughout here, advisor or consultant. I really think in this industry you are transcending beyond just being a commoditized inspector, and you are actually becoming an advisor or consultant for their business needs of understanding the maintenance and remediation long-term planning. If you at least think like that, and you at least take that into consideration, then you will set yourself apart and you'll have a different mindset. That goes back into the last thing here, future planning, right? We have to prepare for the long-term needs. So they're CapEx, capital expenses, OpEx, operating expenses, life expectancy of things. If I have a building owner and they've got 20 RTU units, right? They want to know, how long do I have with these units? How long do you think realistically I can keep pushing these things? And if they're all made in 2009, then realistically they're already past their useful life. That's what I'm going to tell them and move on. We are not acting as a true, say, property manager here for these individuals. We're not acting as their maintenance liaison, but you could. I have a I have jobs where people have asked me to be kind of like a project manager for them and help them build out a maintenance plan and get individuals in all these different areas of need. I've done that before. I charge it extra, obviously, but it is possible, and I had comfortability doing that. But even just the basics of your report can help them with cap and op and life expectancy. You're already doing these things. You're already used to them. You're just now going to, again, formulate it differently in your report. Before I take a second and move on, we've gone over a few things here. Does anyone have anything they quickly want to add or detract or ask a question on? I'll give everyone a second to raise a hand if they want to. Right on. Okay, we'll keep moving through. And anytime you do have a question, you can raise your hand and we'll get to it as fast as we can. Okay, so on the next slide here, let's talk about sales and marketing strategy. So, this is where a lot of us are going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do sales and how to market to these individuals. The only way, and I'm giving you very basic information on this course, and you're going to be given some documents at the end of this course that you'll be able to utilize and different websites and channels that you can continue to visit that we've provided for you. But it's important to understand that to truly do good sales and marketing for any of these client types, you have to understand that client type well. So, a lot of basic sales and marketing strategies can be the same for every single client type until you figure out what sticks. But once I really started working more with, say, churches, and I started understanding their needs and I started understanding what capital planning looked like for them, et cetera, then I could really craft a fantastic sales and marketing plan for them. So, for building owners and management groups and REITs, the value proposition for them is they need to understand the importance of proactive planning before it costs them. That is the sales. We're going to get into a lot of rebuttals and things here in a minute. But if I have to say anything at this point, you really need them to understand the importance of proactive planning. Most people are going to give you some sort of rebuttal and say, hey, I don't want your service because XYZ, but also it really all falls down to the same thing, right? Which is, I don't want to spend the money on something I don't think I need to spend the money on. And this is just basic business. You guys all have businesses. You understand this concept as well. If they are not planning and they are not proactive, something will eat their lunch. I have found very few companies that are actively proactively planning for any issues. Everybody seems to be reactionary. And in today's day and age, with our economy and how difficult it is to even have a business, let alone put groceries on your table, these are great selling points. I would tell you, while the housing market might be down, on the commercial ownership market, that side of sales, this is a perfect time to do sales because they really, really, really need to understand their long term planning goals because it could possibly shut them down as a business if they're not prepared for it. And that's the conversation you have with them. That's how you go about this. You have to step up to the plate and have a very curt and straightforward conversation in a kind way, but saying, if you're not planning, you're not doing it well, this is where I can help you. I've had that conversation with many individuals, and a lot of stuff that you're going to do with building managers is going to be cold calling and email. We'll talk about that over on the marketing side. But when you have those communications, it's going to be you engaging with them first, most likely. Now, I do get calls all the time where someone owns a building and they want maintenance help, but a lot of your cold sales are going to be you reaching out to them. So if you don't have a crafted, well articulated conversation, you're going to lose them. And that's the value proposition with them. With sales for them, you have to build long term trust. So, emphasis on ongoing inspection programs. It is not difficult to create annual programs for inspections for commercial properties, right? It's nothing to go in and charge a couple of grand for the first initial inspection and then maybe a grand every year or every quarter, depending upon their business, and just come back out, look at the things you found, see what else has come up, see if it's worsened, etc. You can create plans for that. You would be surprised how many people would have an interest in that. And the good thing is now you charge all that up front or quarterly. Now you have quarterly income and you're not just living by your Sunday night calendar hoping that you're full for the next week. The good thing about commercial is you can plan your income. You can plan it out if you do this correctly. You can say, I'm going to be getting about X amount of dollars every month or every quarter if you stick to the plans. And then with these individuals on the sales side, when you're doing sales, you really want to use the verbiage such as ROI, risk reduction, right? Cost forecasting. Um, they have to understand that you are there again as an advisor on that building and its maintenance. And your whole plan is to risk reduction for them. That's it. That's the biggest thing. You can do cost forecasting if you're comfortable with that later on, but you right now can give them a risk reduction report. So no longer is it just let's just tell them the immediate things and move on. You really have to help them plan in that. Now, when you are doing the marketing for these individuals, right? The content is going to be king for them. So I would recommend on your website blogging for your website and your social media. And so here's what you can do, something that we did on our website, which has been extremely helpful. The question is that I often get is, did you ever get in trouble for putting the address on there? No, I didn't. But also, I don't put addresses on there where they didn't know, the property wasn't being sold or something. Because we're all going to have that situation where they ask us to come out and do the inspection, and they say, "Hey, by the way, you're not inspecting this property. Wink, wink. Right? You're doing an insurance evaluation or whatever." They don't want to know it's being sold or purchased or whatever that looks like. Just be careful how you put things out. But if you go to my website, focusbuildinginspections.com, you'll see that we have our portfolio up there. It hasn't been updated in a couple months, but you'll see that we will put the type of projects we're working on, right? We blog about them. And then we blog about maintenance needs. We blog about running your budget. We blog about long term forecasting. We blog about all these things. And some of these things, these aren't new ideas. We haven't created new ideas. We're just putting refreshed content on our website so that we can drip campaign and send those out to the people that we're doing sales for. If you have a website, it should have blogs on it. It should have you writing content. At this point, you aren't just someone kicking tires and inspecting. If all you're comfortable with doing, this is just my 2 cents. If you're just comfortable doing inspections, but you're not comfortable having good, long-standing conversations, business conversations, really getting to the nitty-gritty of it, if you don't have confidence in doing that, you will struggle in this industry. Because in residential, just based on my experience, you can be a really good inspector and just kind of keep your head down. And as long as you stay busy and you earn the good graces of the agents, then you'll get business. In commercial, you can't just do an inspection and disappear the moment you send the report off. They're going to have questions. There has to be follow ups. You have to instill trust in them with your services. And so, by blogging, by creating things on your website, by showing consistency that you actually do these jobs, something I've recommended to a lot of you in coaching is if you're just getting started, go find 10 buildings that you want to do under 5,000 square feet if you can, because it's smaller and easier, and go develop a process and maybe charge them a lot less because you're doing training. You don't have to tell them that. And then put those on your website as blogs. We did an inspection on a Dollar General, and this is what happened, and this is what they were looking for, et cetera, et cetera. Build trust. That's the best way to do it, by putting those things on your website. Social media is a tough one, especially in today's day and age. LinkedIn has always been the best social media platform for commercial real estate. I have not found any success with Facebook. If you have Facebook success, I would love to know how you did that. But mostly, I just don't like Facebook. So it's probably a personal preference. I know you can get into things like TikTok and Instagram. Some of those things are fine but the problem with that is unless you're going to try to get rich off of making videos, it's hard to curate information and give it directly to the clients that you want to see it. Especially things that are just video platforms where people just scroll through it. Someone in a whole different market might find your video interesting, but it's not the person who's going to pay you. So be very leery on your social media platforms and how much interest you put into them. But LinkedIn and other ideas are going to be great. So that brings me down to channels. So on the marketing, LinkedIn is fantastic. If anyone is familiar with BOMA, so BOMA is essentially BOMA is for building management, and so they teach people how to understand how to operate their buildings, how to manage their buildings, operating long term, things of that nature. Great buzzwords and things you should know. BOMA is doing similar things for building owners as we're doing for you as inspectors when it comes to education, but it doesn't mean you still can't join those organizations. So having some sort of BOMA networking event can be very helpful for building owners. And what you're doing, and we'll talk about this in the rebuttals in a little bit, but you're not coming in and taking away what they already have. You are a supplement. Always remember that. Unless they literally have nothing and it's just in poor condition when it comes to maintenance, you're very rarely going to be giving them something new under the sun that they already haven't heard of. You're coming in and supplementing with your experience. There are a litany of CRE newsletters and REIT newsletters. You should be looking for those things and Googling them. Make sure any newsletter that is informing you on CRE, you need to be a part of it, whether that be an actual physical letter that gets mailed out, a magazine, emails, things of that nature. We also have a CRE update video that I'm going to put out every month. That's going to be a very in-depth video on something that's happening in CRE. Consume all of those things and know your market. If you don't, it's going to be a problem for you. Understand the climate of the political geo world that we live in, because that could affect what you're working on, and you may have to pivot and change gears. You know what? One of the best marketing here is email campaigns. An email campaign is going to be massive for these individuals because there are several ways that you are going to find out online who owns the property and find their contact information. Either you just call and ask, or you use other resources, and we'll talk about some of those resources later, to find out who owns it. And then simply send them drip campaign emails, an initial email, which is, this is what we do, this is what you have, and this is where I can help you. And then follow up call a week later. You're going to have to do some sales here. You're going to have to create a strong CRM. And you're just going to have to get used to that. Either you do it or you bring a team member on to do those sales and marketing for these individuals. But this is a numbers game. And remember, if you own a business, when it comes to planning and executing, what quarter often is the most important quarter? It's the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter. Just like a terrible sports analogy, right? It all comes down to the fourth quarter. When it comes to businesses, yes, I can give you the full phrase of these acronyms. I also have a list of these things I'm going to be providing you after the class that will have them as well. So I can still tell them to you, but I want to get it to you in physical writing. That's a great question. Um, the fourth quarter for businesses is going to be extremely important. A lot of them might still have some budget left over, but also they need to plan for the following year. So, what better way to plan than to plan for their physical building needs and for you to be able to come in and offer services? In the last several years, our September, October, November, and December were slammed. We had more work than we knew what to do with in those months. And I was a single solo inspector at that time doing commercial. And so I was getting more work than I needed, and it was a fun time to be alive. And I realized this isn't just happenstance. This is because the fourth quarter is really something that a lot of people are paying attention to and really planning for in business. So if you're not preparing yourselves right now for your sales funnel to be ready for a fourth quarter inspection jump, then you are doing yourself a disservice. And that is going to possibly hurt you on the sales marketing later. Um, because I can't stress enough that your fourth quarter is going to be massive for your clients and their needs. There are going to be local chapters and associations. So, what I mean by that is um, local chapters, like, for example, there's going to be an apartment association in your area, right? We have a Tulsa Apartment Association. We have an Oklahoma City Apartment Association. I'm based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Um, there's going to be local building owner chapters and investor groups that meet that own buildings. All of these things are available to you to join because they're always looking for vendors, right? But some of these things are very low hanging fruit, like the apartment associations, it's a small fee every year. It's like $400 a year, and then you get to be on all their content and you get access to all their members. So you're pretty much getting a $400 list of all the apartment owners and managers and people running it. So you can do sales to them. That's a great sales channel. And it's very inexpensive, $400, right? But then you get to go to events, you can sponsor events. The more that you can be in front of people, the better. Because here's the deal: when it comes to commercial, you may have a great website. You may have been doing it for years, but unless people actually know who you are, unless you're actually in front of them and shaking hands and having conversation, you may not get found. The thing I have understood in commercial is while Google and SEO is extremely important, don't hear me wrong, it's extremely important, but creating formidable relationships in person will win every single time. If you just have a beautiful website and you just sit back and run Google ads and hope people call you, you will not stay as busy as the person who's pounding the phone and email and joining groups. That's just with anything. You know that to be true in sales. It's mostly true in commercial. When I first started, what I did was I just started calling brokers and calling people that owned big businesses and asking them, can I sit down with you over a cup of coffee and just ask questions on how you conduct your business and your strategy? So I called somebody who owned all of the like Taco Buenos in my area. And he was happy to sit down with me over a cup of coffee and tell me how he does it. And then it ended up leading eventually down the road for me doing inspections for new acquisitions and maintenance inspections for him. But that wasn't what I was aiming for. I was just wanting to have a conversation and a business relationship, but it developed into that. The main message in marketing for these individuals is simple: we help you prevent emergency repairs and reduce long term liability. Now, you can craft that message any way you want, but that's the message, right? Let me come in and help you determine what your needs are and help you get ready for any long term liability that you will not be prepared for. That's it. That's the conversation. It's so very simple. But you can't have the strength of that message, again, unless you understand who your client is. You have to do the research on it and understand them. Now, I will say, as you get started, you're going to take anything and everything that comes your way, and as you should. Right? This isn't a fake it till you make it game. I've never been a fan of fake it till you make it. I think you prepare, do it, rework it, fail, rework it, prepare more. That's the best way to do this. Do not fake it in a way where you put stuff up on your website because you saw it on mine or someone else's and you feel like, oh, I'm going to be really good now. And then you go out and do the job and you weren't prepared at all because you really weren't actually giving them any value. You were just copying people and faking it. Mike asks, does CCPIA plan on creating any generic marketing materials that we can have customized that will include some of what you're referring to? Mike, we actually right now have a department that is creating customized materials. So yes, I will, we can take a note on that, and I will make sure that you guys get that information after, guys and girls get that information after this class. Because yes, we can curate and create marketing for you that if you want to go to those events or you want to show up in person, you can hand those things out. And they'll be great additives. Or dump them in the mail, whatever you want to do. So, Mike, I'm going to turn the mic over to you because you raised your hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. You're on.
Okay,
You're on
perfect.
the air, Mike. How are you?
Right. Long time listener, first time caller. Anyways, no, the reason why I ask is because there's specific offerings that some people, and myself included in certain aspects, are unaware of that we can offer to
Mhm.
potential customers. And if we're not aware of that, and we go with our marketing team, say, hey, build me up, marketing materials for going out and pushing this. If we're not including a lot of those items, maybe because we're not aware of them or they're not pertinent in our area, whatever, it would be nice to have the broad spectrum of that available so that we can at least see what what we should be pushing out. Not necessarily like, hey, let me grab these docs and just send them out as marketing materials, but just for everybody to have a basis of what you should be pushing and to who. That's it.
That's a great question. Yes, we can work on some great examples of curated material too that you can hand out to give you ideas of what that could look like. We can certainly create that for you. Absolutely. That's a great question.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so finishing off on sales and marketing, remember the message. I believe these are going to be the most important client that you'll work with. And once you get a groove down, you're going to be successful. Now, let's talk about their reporting needs. Okay. So I put down 6 things that I think were very important for these type of individuals. I say individuals. I should say the actual name of it for management groups, for REITs, for building owners, things of that nature. Because there's an individual building owner. I realize I said that on the other page, and I don't want to be confusing. So for those client types, I have found 6 things that have been very successful over the years that I have put in my report. Now, I'm going to go ahead and mitigate the conversation that what you're already going to give me is which report writing system do you use? Because that's just the flavor of every conversation right now in commercial. The answer is all of them and none of them at the same time. Meaning, I've used Spectora since its inception. I was one of the first groups to ever go with it. And I still use that for just scheduling and payments now, but I don't use the report writer. I use Scribeware, and I've started with Report On and a few other groups. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create something that will be great for the masses. So I can't answer your question and say you should use one or another because all of them at this point will somewhat create what you're going to need, but they're not creating for you great maintenance schedules. They're not creating for you tables and a report cost and things of that nature. Some of them are trying to get there and they will get there, but the full package isn't there yet. But that's okay. You don't have to have that. What I'm saying in this section is I'm telling you that these are the things that should at least be in your reporting when you're working with these individuals. So I hope that helps. Number one is going to be asset conditions. So I really think it's important for you to highlight deferred maintenance, material deterioration, aging systems. That is going to be important for them. Again, they have to plan. They have to be ready for this. If you've ever done some sort of maintenance checklist or a maintenance log or table or whatever you want to call it, those things are really simple to create. I mean, it's just honestly, it's a spreadsheet that you put all the necessary information in and you attach it to your report in the desired section or an appendix. What that's doing is it's going to do 2 things. It's going to remove the need for you to put, I'm going to say this in a curt way. It's going to remove the need for you to put 100 pictures unnecessarily in your report, right? Some of us are just putting too much in our reports. What this is going to do is instead of putting 100 pictures of data plates for RTUs on your report, you're going to have a maintenance list that's going to list all of those out on it and their age and the refrigerant and their size and what their overall condition appears to be and if they're beyond life expectancy, whatever you want to put on your maintenance list. That right there holds more volume and weight and gravitas than you putting a whole bunch of pictures on there and writing a few sentences. But they have to know what the condition of those assets are. If you are not comfortable understanding asset condition, then we have a life expectancy chart that you can use on CCPA's website. I know we're working on some fantastic maintenance programming right now that you guys can utilize in the field later. But also, it's not going to be a big issue if you just call someone local or do a coaching call with me, and I'll help you understand what maintenance is, help you understand how to look at asset conditions and how to plan. Um, it's not difficult. You don't have to be an expert at it, but there's basic knowledge that you can use. Life expectancy, hopping into it again, I believe life expectancy needs to be on your report. You need to be discussing that with them. That holds more weight, right? Remember, the final product is the report. That's what you are going to be delivering. That's what they care about. You can be in the field for 20 hours or 20 minutes. They don't care as long as the report comes back and it has the necessary information that they hired you for. A lot of us are going to fail because we're not going to have good pre inspection conversations and discern what our client needs and put that in the report. These are low hanging fruit. These are things that I think are just knock out of the parks that you have to have in the report. There's other things your clients are going to need on top of this. But understand life expectancy, right? It holds more gravitas instead of saying 100 RTUs need to be replaced because they're out of date. It's another thing to say 99 of the 100 RTUs on the roof were manufactured in 2009. These are beyond their normal life expectancy based on whatever resource you use, and they should be replaced. Replacing each of these units could be an estimated 5 to 8 grand. In total, that could cost you X amount of dollars for an immediate repair line, right? Boom. How much weight does that hold? They're going to look at your report and now they're going to go, wow, we really have to do better at planning because now we're 200 grand behind. You're opening their eyes and helping them with that. Life expectancy does it. Understand the repair versus replacement. Okay. Do they need to replace it or repair it? Sometimes we're not going to know, nor do we need to know everything. Again, I'm telling you, you don't have to know how everything operates, how it's repaired, any of that nature. We understand life expectancy, so we can understand that something's beyond life. But let's be honest, if I look at something, I may look at an electrical panel, and you'll learn that just because an electrical panel is old or it's an older brand or a Federal Pacific, whatever, it doesn't have to be replaced necessarily. Electrical panels can last forever. But if it's in an area and that electrical panel's beat to crud and it's rusted and stained and it's full of debris, it probably needs to be replaced now. It's beyond its life expectancy. So I'll let them know that hey, this isn't a simple repair where we have knockouts and a damaged dead cover. This whole thing's just in poor shape. Or whatever you want to do. Sometimes we can easily discern what is a repair, what is a replacement, but they at least need to know that so they can create actionable guidance. And if you feel comfortable adding the cost to it, then by means do so. Now, just because we have cost to cure, we'll talk about that in a second, staying on the repair versus replacement, sometimes you may curate a list and you may send it to a contractor and say, hey, look at this inspection report and put together some hard numbers for me on repairs or replacements. You can do that. You don't have to create your own cost report. You don't have to send it to a repair pricer. There's a litany of ways to get costs. And my cost to cure class is in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about that in that class heavily. Um, I believe on the reporting needs, they're really going to need regulatory. So you should have a life safety section. You should be doing an accessibility survey and report for them. You should be looking for any possible code issues that you were familiar with or feel comfortable reporting on. Remember, you're not a code enforcer, same as if you were on the home inspection side. But if you understand code and if you can cite it correctly, it'll hold weight inside your client's report. You're not going to get sued for it. Don't worry about it. I promise you. Out of thousands of inspections, I've never once had anybody come back to me and say the information in your report was inaccurate and I'm suing you for it. Never. The only times I have people come back is they want clarification on something, but that's it. It's never you did something wrong. I've never had that happen. They need to understand preventative maintenance. That's not the repair and replacement. That is flag areas of usual upkeep to help client plan for it. Okay. If you already know that this side of the building gets a lot of rain and it's washing away the gradient, that every year they may have to regrade that area or they have to project for, better drainage system. If you know that brick is going to spall because it's not getting sun and it's a lot of moisture, let them know that hey, there's going to have to be some preventative maintenance in these areas or whatever that looks like. Again, this is why I say at some point you are going to find the building and client type you like to work with and get really good at those buildings. Because this is going to help you in the preventative maintenance area. And then, of course, a cost to cure, a 5 to 10 year. I always do 10 year projection to support any sort of planning they need. And again, we have a class for that, more information on it, so I won't get into it heavily. But I think and I know that every single client I work with has one goal in mind. What do I need to fix and how much is it going to cost? That's it. That's really the biggest thing they want to know. So you should come into mind that things like cost to cure, life expectancy, all of that is going to be very important. Now, let's take a second and talk about some of the common objections that we're going to get with our clients. These are a lot of objections that I have received over the years. These are objections that I have asked other people to give me that maybe they have come up, but these are going to be very basic. And if it's not this exact verbiage, it's something verbiage close to it. So we already have a maintenance team. So they're assuming here they have an in house staff that's going to be enough, right? They're saying that who we already have employed is going to be perfect. So we don't really need anybody else to come in. And honestly, a rebuttal for this is very simple. You can say something like, absolutely, right? I know your team knows the building best, but our inspections can supplement the work with third party objectivity, right? I'm a third party. I do not have to care whether your building succeeds or fails, right? I am disinterested. So as a third party, I can give you a detailed report and maybe some sort of life cycle forecast to help prioritize tasks and avoid costly surprises. What I have found is if somebody is saying we already have a maintenance team, then they are trying to save money. And often people who have maintenance teams, unless it's just a top tier like industrial type place, or say an organization like Walmart or something like that, right? Yeah, they obviously have a maintenance team. You're probably not going to be working for them. But if it's an apartment complex and they have a maintenance team, right? You know that maintenance team is not a top notch team likely, and they're missing things, and there's projected faults that are going to happen, and you can come in and help them supplement. You never want to say, well, I'm better than your maintenance team, I know more, because you don't know what the maintenance team knows. You're saying, let me come in and be a third party, disinterested individual and help you create any sort of reporting and avoid surprises. The next one is we only inspect when there's a problem. So, what does that mean? It means they're reactive. And it also means that they probably don't have the capital to get into planning, unfortunately, because they're extremely reactive. And something that you can come back with is, you know what, that makes sense that you're only going to be doing any sort of inspections for urgent issues. However, it's important to understand that regular inspections are going to prevent those surprises by catching issues early, right? It's like getting a checkup before you feel sick. It's cheaper, it's smarter, and it's more strategic. Sometimes when you hear rebuttals like that, you think, that's really dumb. I'm never going to say that. If you say these things to your clients, it will strike a nerve with them. It will make sense. It don't have to, say it exactly like that, but I'm honest. As I read these rebuttals throughout this course, just know that these things are crafted in a way that they're very basic, but they get to the point. We've never had major issues before. We've never had major issues before. So they're just saying they've never had anything come up that's cost them so much money that they're hurting. So their issues may have been a blown receptacle or maybe some, simple roof repairs or whatever. And I like to praise them for that, whether they're in the unit for 1 day or 100 years, right? I want to say, you know what? That's a testament to your good management. And I want you to know that inspections help you maintain that record by adapting to aging systems. And we can also keep an eye on any sort of codes or life safety that's changing. And we can help you evolve as a tenant because you're going to have needs. And we want to make sure that you avoid any liabilities. So, what we're saying is kudos to you. You're doing great at running this business, okay? But allow us to come alongside you now and help you adapt. Because the individuals that don't have issues either have a stellar maintenance team and they really don't need you, or they're just lucky and life hasn't kicked them in the teeth yet when it comes to building ownership. And you being able to come in and pre plan for them will be a great win. This is often like a little dentist office or something of that nature where they're like, well, things are fine right now. Okay. Until something happens later, the easy way to get around that is what I said. Let us help you maintain that record in adapting. We already walk the property regularly. So that's assuming, again, that they have some sort of maintenance or professional who understands the building well that's actually walking it. What happens because you are a trained individual, right? Um, you know the ins and out of commercial properties, or you will at least. They may understand common issues with the property, but they may not know the complexities that you do. So, something easy to come back with on that is just simply saying, hey, I know that you are the eyes and the ears on the ground. Our role is to support you with technical insight, right? We can create reserve estimates for you as well. And we have compliance documentation that your team can have so that we can expertly compile any sort of experience that you need. Meaning, I know you're the eyes and ears on the ground. Let us come in as a third party again. Let us come in as a third party and help you get organized. They may say, no, thank you. And they may go, I'll think on it. Or they may go, I would actually really appreciate that. Right? Even though you get these rebuttals, or even though you get these objections and you give a rebuttal, this is not the end of the conversation. If they leave right there, this is the beginning of a campaign, right? It's not the end of it. Unless they just legitimately said, I have a robust maintenance team and I'll never need your services, you may make a note to, shoot them something once a year or once a quarter as just like an ongoing maintenance blog that you might write. And they may or may not know that. right? They may have a robust maintenance team, but they may not realize that, 410A refrigerant is being replaced with two other refrigerants, and it's a different type of refrigerant, and it could cause safety issues, and they may have to redo their buildings. They may not know that. They may know it's coming, but they don't know the extent because of the research you've done, right? So sending them little things over the year may yield a return later on. A lot of sales are not going to be immediate. Our clients don't always approve extras, right? So if they're a maintenance group, honestly, that's why we provide modular reporting. You can request only what adds value, and we'll equip you with the data to help your client understand long term ROI. So again, you're not coming in and saying, here's the kitchen sink, take it or leave it. You're coming into a property management group and saying, allow me to find the immediate issues to help them plan. That's it. Let me find the big things that are obvious. I do this a lot with property management groups who do multifamily. We got really popular and really busy just doing external inspections of multifamily buildings because what happens is their maintenance team is consistently inside people's units fixing things failing, but on the outside, there are major capital projects that need to be addressed, and a lot of them aren't ahead of it, nor does their maintenance team fully understand the scope of it. So that has always been an easy sell. And they're always like, well, you know what? Our clients, they don't always really approve inspections or extra things. That's okay. I want you to know that I can provide specific reporting for their needs and not some big, tier three gold level inspection that I have. That's not going to work for everybody. You have to be able to break things apart and give your client what they need exactly. We will need uniformity across multiple markets. Now, this is going to be a REIT, right? This is going to be some sort of a trust that has a lot of portfolios. And what they're saying is you can do an inspection over here, but it's going to be different than what I might get in another state, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to have uniformity in how I'm getting reporting or data, and it's not going to be very helpful to me. One, you can let them know that you will travel, right? So the good thing about programs like we'll get to it here in a little bit. I don't want to get to it too early, but there's programs and things online that you can figure out who owns portfolios, where they own properties, what states they're in, and if they're all grouped together, then do a package sale deal to them. Right? Go travel and make money with those individuals because then you can do ongoing maintenance inspections for them. Trust me. But really, what you're telling them is listen, consistency is our strength. We follow a standardized, scalable approach across all regions, ensuring clean data and aligned reporting for your asset management and capital planning. When you can tell them, I will personally, or someone on my team will inspect every single one of your buildings in your portfolio, you will get consistency throughout. What a lot of times holds them up is they may have something in Oklahoma, in Arizona, over here in New York, something over here in California, right? They're going to get four different services because it's not the same company. That makes it difficult to plan and marginalize, right? But if it's one company who can do it, that may not be in your wheelhouse as an inspection company. But if it is, I recommend going after portfolios because they have a lot of properties. And if you can provide value, then you will stay in their good graces and have ongoing jobs for years. Trust me. And then the last one, we use internal due diligence teams. Okay. So that may mean that they are buying a lot of properties and they own properties and they don't have necessarily a maintenance team, but they have people who go around when they're prepping to sell or anything of that nature and just do a walkthrough checklist, essentially. It might be like a maintenance director or program manager who just knows the buildings well, and he'll do or she'll do a checklist and that's it. So, what I tell them is our team will integrate seamlessly with your already existing internal process. So, we're actually going to provide detailed field support. We're going to do system analysis and documentation formatted to your benchmarks. So, if they're saying these are our benchmarks, this is what we're trying to get out of this checklist, you can come alongside them and help them. If they're just regularly doing business, you may not be able to come in. However, if they are about to sell it, or they're projecting to sell it, or they're reevaluating their portfolio holdings, you might be able to come in and come alongside them and help with that. I've had that happen where we reached out. They said no. A year later, they said, hey, we're getting ready to dump this portfolio. We would like for you to come in and do what you asked us to do last year. Perfect. Made a good chunk of change on it. Okay. You said, Tiffany, Lance, will there be some sort of handout for this portion to assist us with responses? Yes, absolutely. I have a handout here that should be already listed. You'll be getting it. And it has these objections and it has rebuttals that will come up against those. So you can at least have a starting point. Absolutely. That's a great question, Tiffany. Okay, so where are we going to find these individuals? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what these services are, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation on them. Um, I will allow you, obviously, to do your own research on finding them, and there'll be some links and stuff provided to you after the class. But some of these things are not going to be like everyone else, right? Like tax records, title companies. That's going to be very specific to your area. And I can't necessarily provide that exact thing for you. You're going to have to do the research. But where can we find these types of clients? Okay. So we have things like LoopNet and Crexy. So if any of you have ever just Googled a commercial building, usually LoopNet and Crexy are going to come up. And these are just online marketplaces used to track active commercial real estate listings and recent property sales. Okay. So often, if I'm doing my due diligence and I am looking at a property before I put a proposal together, maybe before I even have a conversation with my client, I can always do a simple Google search and a LoopNet or Crexy listing will come up, especially if it's active. If it's not active, you may not find it on them, or you'll find a really old listing and it won't be very helpful to you. But if things are listed on LoopNet or Crexy, then what I can figure out for the most part is I can look at, is there a management company attached to it? I can look at if the owner's on there somehow, or if there's a capital group that has it in holdings for a portfolio. Sometimes it puts that information on there, and I can take a look at it and go, oh, okay, I can figure out who owns this property. They probably own more, or if they're getting rid of a property, they're going to do more property, or whatever that looks like. You also have CoStar and Reonomy. So, CoStar and Reonomy, these are research platforms that provide detailed ownership. They're going to provide detailed ownership and tenant and property data for commercial real estate. These are fantastic resources. They are fantastically expensive. So they're probably not going to be for everybody. We've used CoStar and things of that nature in the past. A plentiful amount of data, but if you're not good at collecting data and using it, these type of resources will not be the best for you initially. But there are organizations that will sell you data from them, which might be a better option to curate to your needs. But CoStar and Reonomy, these are ownership data websites. You can most certainly find who owns buildings, who has portfolios, what real estate's involved, what insurance is involved. I mean, to the finite detail, these things are fantastic. Now, obviously, you can use things like LinkedIn. I really want everyone here to understand how to use LinkedIn really well because it's going to help you understand who owns buildings, responsible for buildings and businesses, things of that nature. And if anything, you can start going through gatekeepers or having initial conversations with people and starting to figure out who is responsible. So obviously it's a networking platform useful for identifying and connecting real estate stakeholders. Use it as such, right? LinkedIn is not like Facebook. People aren't on there being goofy or posting memes. It's on there, but it's not. They're trying to keep it very professional. So come at it with a professional approach, and LinkedIn will be very helpful to you. There's also something that's like tax records and county assessor offices. You can obviously do free Google searches for your local assessor office if you have it. Not everybody has them, unfortunately, but for the most part, you should be able to find tax records and see who owns the property. It may not give you a phone number, but you at least have ownership, and you can start from there. And then same with title companies. So there's firms that verify legal ownership and ensure clear title transfers, right, during legal residential transactions. If anything, they may not be giving you business, but you should be pairing business with them. Linking up with title companies and, you know, other individuals that have a hand in the process of ownership are fantastic. They are going to be extremely helpful to you, and you'll be surprised how much they're willing to refer you out. And what I mean by gatekeepers, that's a good question, is you are going to have individuals who, let's say, for example, a church, okay? Often the person who controls the narrative is exactly what it is. It's a controller, the financial person. But you might have a maintenance guy or girl um, who is over the building. They might be your first point of contact, right? They may be the gatekeeper. Because if you can work with them and get them interested in what you're doing, then they might be able to go back to the controller or someone in charge and say, hey, this is a great product. This is what we should use. If you go straight to the controller, they may just ignore you altogether. There's a litany of different type of gatekeepers, right? If you're trying to get to the president of the company, of the property management company, right, but you're only ever going to get some sort of lower level executive or assistant, you might have to work through them for a while to get up. The good thing about LinkedIn is you kind of get to see all the players if they're listed and figure out, oh, I'm going to go after this person first and do some sales with them and get them primed up so that I can then get to this individual. And give an example of how I would go searching for meaningful contacts on LinkedIn. Well, yeah, absolutely. So let's say, for example, there is a large dental firm in your area. So we have one here in Oklahoma. I think it's based out of Oklahoma, but they've got like 20 locations around me, right? So what I might do is go on LinkedIn and search for that company and search for everyone associated with it. And I might start finding that, oh, there's a property management group that's associated with it, or oh, the owner is on LinkedIn. I can reach out to them individually through messaging, or whatever. That's how you can use LinkedIn. You can search for businesses or people individually and see what else they're attached to. It's a little bit of work, but it certainly is helpful to give you the records that are necessary. Um, Now, going on to referrals, how you can actually partner up with referral groups. Remember what I said? You've got title companies. They really should be over here as well. But you're going to have, again, you're going to have BOMA conferences. These are going to be industry events, and not just BOMA. There's other conferences too. There's CCIM, there's SILR, there's a litany of CRE, commercial real estate groups that you can join. But these are going to be industry events focused on education, networking, and just advocacy for commercial building owners and managers. Um, that's going to be, I mean, it's Building Owners Manager Association, so it's going to be the people you want. Then you're going to have things like national real estate investor summits. Okay, some of these are online, some of them are in person. If you go to a real estate investment summit and you go put on your nicest shirt and smell halfway decent, and this is a great time, Michael, to have something to hand out to people, or at least strike up a conversation. I've had success at some of these that are local, that are just like a cocktail hour or they're meeting over breakfast. It's not a networking group. It's just people who get together and bounce ideas off of each other. They may have a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group you can join as well. That way you can keep a pulse on what's happening in your market. But these things are really great because that's going to be just where investors get together and explore market trends. And they're going to talk about strategies and other capital opportunities. And if you can slip your name into that conversation, then you will get business out of it somewhere. There's also things like RealCom and IBCon. These are just national conferences that are centered on real estate technology, smart buildings, and innovation. So, well, you may not be having a table at these events, right? These are industry leaders. And if you can at least get into conversations with industry leaders, then you are going to be in a good position, right? I have had opportunities to go sit at tables with industry leaders and just listen. I don't have anything to offer at that moment. I just want to listen and take because they're giving great information and it's something I can use for my business later, most assuredly. Same with like REIT Week. That's a major investor conference where publicly traded trusts will connect with institutional investors and analysts. So this is going to be a very detailed financial get together where they just talk about investments and finances. It's pretty cool. I've never got to go to one. I would like to. I've joined online versions of it, and it's really fun. But that stuff really interests me. It kind of geeks out about it. And then, of course, just look at local trade shows, right? There's going to be property management trade shows. Like I said, that apartment association or an association for assisted living, whatever, they do trade shows. And I'm going to give you a little bit of free advice here. Learn to speak to groups of people and educate them. If you can speak to groups of people confidently and you can educate them, okay, what you're going to do is now you're going to create a small educational course. So if you go to the Property Management Association or the Assisted Living Association, you say, "Hey, I notice you have an event coming up next year. Can I be one of your 2-hour speakers and let me speak on life safety for this type of property?" Right? You may not get paid to go do it, but you will be in a room full of decision makers. And that is some of the best sales you'll ever be able to do. But there's local trade shows all over. So find your area, figure out what works for you, and run with that. Are there any questions right now before we take a second and go on to the next um, customer group? I'll wait a minute here and see if anybody has anything they'd like to add. Okay, if that's a no, good for me. We can move on. As always, you have the chat down there. You can drop something in it if you want to. I'm keeping an eye on that. Okay, let's dive into the next one. Now, this one obviously, this one is going to be more of what you're going to be familiar with already. Okay, this is already what you're thinking of. You're already thinking of people who are buying and selling commercial properties. Um, this is going to be something that you're going to just get in the industry because it's just happening. It's called the due diligence period. A lot of you now are probably only getting this type of work, and you really haven't started going after other individuals yet. My goal through this whole course is to open your eyes to show you there is a multitude of ways to get to people, but you should never neglect the due diligence period because the due diligence period will bring to you buyers and sellers and teams of individuals who are doing just that in the industry. Now, let's talk for a second about who they are going to be. Okay. So we have property buyers and sellers, right? So these are going to be individuals and businesses or investment groups that purchase or sell commercial properties. Buyers may be looking for some sort of income producing asset or an owner occupied building. Think of that dentist again, or they're wanting to do some sort of development project. And then a seller obviously is probably looking to cash out or invest in something else or reposition their portfolio. Okay. Then you have the brokers and the agents. So you've got the real estate brokers and agents that act, as the intermediary between the buyer and the seller. So they're going to facilitate transactions just like you would be used to in residential. But what's going to happen is brokers are going to be far more interested in this building and they're going to have far more information to provide than, say, a residential agent ever would. They fill out the information online and you get it for a home. But for commercial, the information provided is extremely vast because people have to understand what the building is, what type it is, what electrical's in it, what's operating on it, what's inside of it, what stays, what goes. There's just, tax records, documents, finances around it. Does the neighborhood around it, produce income, things of that nature. That's all listed through a broker. I have been told, you're probably not going to experience it, and maybe you will, but I have been told that commercial brokers don't like to be referred to as realtors or real estate professionals. They like to be referred to as a broker or a broker agent. That's what they like to be referred to. I don't know. That's just what I've been told. I've just stuck with it ever since. But then if you go look at a broker's office and you go to their website, you'll see that there's brokers, there's principals, there's presidents, there's all sorts of different verbiage. So you're really going to want to understand how to use the vernacular of brokers and agents, understand their different positions, what they mean. It always has to do with tenure, right? Once you see things like CCIM and SIOR, you want to go in and understand what is that. Those are designations. So CCIM is going to be they had to go through a training program for it. They have to have so much revenue a year to stay in it. SIOR is that's going to be industrial and office real estate. So they have to do so much of that a year. Again, sales has to be so much, yada, yada. So those are all designations. So if you start seeing those behind people, you know that they've been in the game for a while. Um, and then you're going to have CRE attorneys. So you're going to have commercial real estate attorneys, right? So these are going to be legal professionals who are going to specialize in real estate law, which is very important, and ensure that transactions are legally and sound and properly documented. So they review contracts. They're going to handle title issues. They're assisting with lease agreements and managing any sort of legal dispute. And if there's ever a really complex deal, maybe between REITs or people dumping portfolios, then they are going to be involving risk or high value assets. Those are going to be the ones to advise through inspections to limit liability. So I work with quite a few attorneys. I get calls from attorneys all over, whether they found me organically or I reached out to them or just through osmosis on a deal. Attorneys love to work with us, and with attorneys, as later we'll talk about what they need in their reporting. But attorneys, they are going to want finite financial quick information. So if you like providing that, and we'll talk about that later, then attorneys are going to be one of your favorite clients. They are a no BS group of people, right? Attorneys are just, it's black and white. Provide me the details and let's move on. I love working with attorneys. So again, you're going to see some things kind of filter over as key needs. A lot of clients have similar needs, but just at different stages of life of the commercial building. With these individuals, they are really going to need risk mitigation. Okay. So, this obviously is identifying and addressing any issues that they come across, like costly problems. You're going to use your inspections. And you're going to be able to, uncover for owners and people selling any sort of issues, right? Any sort of concerns or code violations, so that way they can reduce any sort of financial or operational risk in buying a property. And then, of course, negotiation leverage, right? Obviously, you guys are familiar with this. If someone is using your services and buying your services, they're going to use your inspection form to negotiate better terms, right? They're going to lower the price, they're going to get something in return for it, whatever that might be. Um, your report is going to be powerful for that. So remember that when you curate and put a report together, it is a very important piece of document that is worth possible millions to somebody on top of the already couple thousand they paid for it, right? So if something has to be replaced, there's got to be credits. There's going to be things that are going to be necessary for them to understand. You get that. And then also back to CapEx and OpEx. These individuals are buying a property again to make money or at least not lose it. So being able to estimate future repairs and operating needs is going to be huge for these individuals. Anytime you have someone who, excuse me, anyone you have someone who's buying a property, a cost to cure report and some sort of assessment like that should always be at the forefront of your sales funnel, because they are going to be able to benefit it most as they plan out. And it really works well for them too, like a cost to cure report, because on someone who already owns a property, they might need more finite numbers, right? So they may actually need for you to give them the exact cost of replacement for that parking lot because they had to budget for it. But if they're just buying a property, they really need like a 20,000-foot overview of the building, right? So that's where a cost to cure report comes in really well, because it's an opinion of cost. I'm not giving them exact numbers. So I'm not as worried about it. So if they look at it and go, okay, he thinks it's going to cost about 300 grand to get in this building, that gives me enough clarity to understand that I have more than 300 grand in projected savings. We're going to be fine. Let's move forward. Or, wow, 300 grand, we were only expecting to maybe liquidate and put in maybe 150. 300's a lot. Let's really evaluate this and see if this is something we can actually move forward with. And you're letting them know these aren't exact numbers, but also those numbers aren't just fake numbers. You didn't just pull numbers out of your booty. There's a method to it. So it's more realistic than you can imagine, and you don't have to be a PM or an estimator to get to it. How often have you had to review a phase one report, and is this a requirement for us to be able to review? You know what? That's a good thing. I'll stay right here on that question, and I'll talk about it. So I never have to review phase one reports. I'll ask for any sort of inspections or reports that have happened previously, but what ends up happening is if it is a curated report like a phase one inspection, and they're out there looking for wrecks to figure out what needs to be remediated or dug up and further evaluated, then that's going to be outside my scope anyways. Now, if I notice that they said over in the southeast corner there's a buried tank and they haven't done any sort of remediation for it, then I may look over there and see if there's any issue with the ground or drainage. But again, they're really already going to address that in those reporting. So it's good to know one has already been completed, and I would look over it just to find anything that might be low hanging that I can utilize for my report or pay attention to. But other than that, not much. And it's not a requirement for us to be able to review it, right? It's a separate service, it's a separate company. Now, you might be doing the initial phase one inspections for individuals, right? There are groups that will hire you to go do the field survey and fill out their information and send it back so they can do the report. But outside of one that's already created, no, you're really not going to be evaluating that. Same with anything else like engineering reports or environmental reports, things of that nature. If it's already done and completed, there's no need for you to get in that lane and then further evaluate it or interpret it. It's already been done. But that's a good question. You risk getting into some liability issues there if you're trying to get into their lane and better explain it or try to apply it. Now, I have taken people's reports and applied it to mine and further harped on something, right? So it's like, again, I went out to the field and I found that the east side of the building is in duress and there's some severe structural issues. And also based on further review of the engineering report, it is important that remediation occur immediately. And this might be a cost that if they gave them a cost, then you can take that cost and put it, in your cost to cure or whatever. I would do it that way as like a standalone. This is something I could use to, make something really drive the point home, but not interpret it. Okay, let's talk about sales and marketing for these individuals. So, their value proposition for buyers and sellers and attorneys, anyone involved in that process, is you want to make sure that they can walk away from a bad deal or do best negotiation. That's one, right? I always say we help you walk away from bad deals or negotiate better ones. That's really what we're trying to do in this process. Here's the deal. In commercial, this is a very non emotional transaction. So don't expect people to be overly emotional when you deliver your report information. Okay. Because they need the facts and they need to be told how it is. That's it. Succinct to the point, period, as Rob likes to say. And if we're not speaking that way and we're not putting ourselves out that way, then we are really not meeting that value proposition. And when we put the report together, we really are helping them understand if it's a good deal and if they can negotiate something differently. A good sales marketing for this is when you're putting your proposal together and sending it over to them, provide them sample reports to highlight negotiation insights along the proposal. Okay. Because what's going to happen is when you're trying to secure this client and you got their needs and you're going to put a proposal together, if you send over a sample report that backs up what you were discussing, and you were saying, this is how I'm going to help you understand and negotiate better, then they can see that alongside your proposal. And whatever the number is on your proposal, it may not matter as much as, oh, I really like this sample report. He's right. She's right. It's really doing what we need. And I'll pay the money for that. Always give examples, always give case studies, things of that nature. We'll talk about marketing, but sales, always dump samples on them, especially for these clients. And then, just like residential, you can partner with brokers to be in their referral pipeline. But I will say it's very different. I'd say only like a handful of my inspections do I ever actually meet the broker agent or see them in the process. I'm predominantly work with my clients. Now, the broker agent may do an initial reach out because they're saying, hey, I know you need an inspection. I've got a guy. I'll reach out to Lance and talk to him and see if we can do a deal. But then after that, they pass me along to the client and that's it. But the best way to get in good graces with brokers is not like we would do in residential where we buy affection. Okay, let's be honest. That's what we were doing. We were buying affection, right? We're buying things. We're paying for lunches. We're giving them swag, whatever that looks like. We know we're at open houses. I get it. All those things can be successful in their own right, but in commercial, that's not necessary. In commercial, I would literally pick out the top dog in the office and I would say, I am in commercial real estate like you on the inspection side, and understanding commercial real estate to its fullest is very important to me. Can I take you to a cup of coffee and just pick your brain on how you do your organization? What do you see in the pipeline, right? What is your pulse on CRE? Man, they will talk with you. They would love that because what you're saying is, I don't want to sell to you right now. I don't want to take an hour of your time and just sell to you why I'm great. I want an hour of your time to just understand who you are and what you guys do. And that starts the conversation. I did that with 4 different broker offices when I first started, and those 4 offices still refer business to me to this day. So I think it's important to understand that those are all opportunities that you have to be taking in. You're probably already used to doing those already. Now, on the marketing side, the content that's going to be really great for them is going to be case studies. Okay. So if you have case studies, then you can either use your own case studies or create a case study on ChatGPT or use someone else's case study. But what I mean by that is when you can say, ABC company came to us to purchase a property. Okay. The property was being sold at $1 million. There was no record of any maintenance or, deferral of any issue. And we were able to come in, do our initial inspection, and actually find a lot of issues. So what we were able to provide, right, was value, but also our client was able to come back and say, "Hey, we're going to reduce this thing because all these hidden issues that you didn't even know about, or you at least didn't list on any disclosure." And then we helped them secure that. A seller is selling their property. We came out, we did an initial inspection on the property before they listed it. We helped them better understand the health of their building, and they were able to put their building out on the market with confidence. And because we had had an inspection and an engineer and all that stuff already completed, they were able to buy and sell the property much faster. See, here's the thing. In commercial, if they do a seller inspection, the buyer will likely take that information and just move on with it and not get an inspection, right? On resi side, if you did a sell inspection, the buyer's still probably going to get an inspection to match up against what you found. On commercial, very rarely have I ever done a seller inspection and then another inspection came through and then they compared the two. Often the buyer might call me and say, "Hey, I see you did an inspection for them. Can you expand on this a little bit more?" And say, "Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation about it, but I'm going to charge you, 2 hours." Fine, that's great. Let's go over it together. Boom. I had two customers in the deal. Um, just know that case studies are going to be really helpful here. The different channels for these individuals are going to be, especially the brokers and real estate attorneys, are just going to be drip campaigns. If you are going to be consistently sending out marketing as far as maintenance or CRE knowledge and understanding, even if they know the information that you're sending them, what you're doing is you are telling them that you are a thought leader in the industry and that you're someone to pay attention to, right? Because let's imagine that you are a top echelon producer and you have 40 years of experience and you just understand your area very well. If someone you've never met comes up and can sit down and hold a formal couple-hour conversation with you and really tell you what you already know, you're going to say, "This person really knows their stuff," right? That's going to set you apart. If you do that through, say, a drip campaign and an email, it will be just as powerful. And you can drop stuff, little nuggets on them, and they'll be able to use it, or at least go, "Hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. If something comes up, I'll use them." Um, I said CCIM. So CCIM is an organization for training brokers, but you can join it as a third party, meaning that you're not going to go through the classes, but they have monthly lunches. So it's like $25 for a non-member to show up to their lunches. Just show up. Find some of those brokers you've worked with. Say, "Hey, are you going to the CCIM lunch?" "Yes, I am." "Cool. Let me buy your lunch at it and let me sit at your table." And then you just strike up conversations because someone new is going to be sitting at that table and they're going to go, "Yeah, I work with Lance all the time on industrial properties." And they're going to go, "Oh, cool. I have a lot of industrial buyers. I'll keep you in mind," or we'll at least start the conversation. And then investment forums, like I mentioned earlier, you can get on Facebook or internet or LinkedIn or anything like that. There's going to be forums where people are consistently looking to buy and sell commercial properties and float them or portfolio management. You can throw your stuff out there again, just like those drip campaigns. Once a month, maybe post a post on one of those sites about something that's up and coming in CRE or something that has to do with maintenance or very specific to the buildings that they're buying, and just let that be kind of a small drip, and you will get people inadvertently from that. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a question over here in the board. Could you please provide a list of icebreakers and talking points? Yeah, I can create something like that. I'm going to make a note on that right now. That's a great question. Way to pose that. Okay, let's move on to their reporting needs. Okay. So, most assuredly, some of you are already doing commercial due diligence inspections. Okay. So, if you're already doing this, yes, Mike, ChatGPT is really good for this. Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Holly's saying she's keeping a list of all these questions. So thank you so much for that. And yes, Mike, you were correct. If you know how to create the right prompts, you can ask ChatGPT something as simple as, I am sitting down with the broker principal of a national commercial real estate firm, and I just want to ask them basic questions to get to know them and their company structure over an hour coffee. What would be some questions I could ask them, and how to cater those questions to them? And you can even take that person's LinkedIn profile, their Facebook profile, anything like that, an article about them, and dump that into ChatGPT, and it'll also curate things for it. Instead of having a chat, build me a PowerPoint presentation right now based off the ideas you've made here. Perfect. So let's talk about reporting needs. Man, there's a whole ChatGPT class we could probably teach, to be honest. AI in commercial is so helpful if you do it correctly. Okay, reporting needs. Major system conditions, right? You've got to summarize systems and maintenance schedules. Um, what that you This is going to be very simple, obviously, but if they are buying a property, they want to know the bigger picture. So, giving them a maintenance schedule for all the major system conditions is going to be important. HVAC, electrical, those are two of the easiest ones to do. I can give them a whole list of electrical panels and a whole list of all the HVAC and hot water tanks, things of that nature. It's harder to do on plumbing, but you can also do, it was determined that the plumbing lateral was cast iron, and this is a building from the 70s. So just know that, replacement might be necessary. That's the condition of it, whatever. They're really going to need to understand red flags. Okay. So this may be outside of your scope initially, but this is going to be the launch pad for another professional to possibly come out with you. So you really need to highlight any sort of environmental issues, not phase one. I'm talking about, well, it could be a phase one issue where it is, like I said, taking that report and utilizing it again, but saying, hey, there are buried oil tanks over here. There is mold growth in this room. I understand people shy away from using the word mold, but mold is encompassing of so many different things. If you see a growth that's from moisture on the wall, you can use organic growth. You can use the word mold. It doesn't matter. What we're going to say is that has to be tested, right? You're just not going to give them what it is based off of your visual. You're going to tell them it has to be tested. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Any structural issues. So anything that you think is a red flag, what are those high money things? And a red flag might be not just environmental or structural concern. It could be the parking lot is in just complete crap shape, and it's a 20,000 square foot parking lot. So you are going to have to spend a lot of money to remediate this parking lot immediately if you think customers are going to park on it, right? Um, then you're going to be able to drop in any sort of deal impact section. So, a deal impact section, this is going to clearly link issues to financial impact. So, again, going back to estimated repair costs here. So, you're going to want to be able to have anything that's triggering for, say, lending or insurance or any sort of legal issue. Um, Again, if this is going to be that parking lot comment, or if the roof is really in need of replacement and saying this roof definitively needs to be replaced at this much money, that is the information they need. It doesn't have to be a cost report, but adding costs and summaries to it will be important for buyers and sellers, especially sellers, right? If you come up with all these different things and you give them immediate cost repairs and they go, holy crap, I didn't know I had $500,000 worth of repair needs or something around that, then that's going to help them understand that this may not be easy. I just did an apartment complex, our team did the other day, where the seller has had two fallen through contracts. Couldn't understand why. We went out and did our inspection and we understand exactly why. And we were able to provide a report to that seller to say, listen, you've got 10 down units that are just in complete structural disarray. You've got this, and this. What was happening was those budget items kept racking up and racking up and racking up. And it got to a point where he thought it was a couple hundred thousand. And realistically, we're looking at a couple of $1 million worth of repair items. That's why people were walking away, but they weren't having inspections done. They were just walking through and taking mental notes of, this is going to be too much, let's leave. The inspection is going to help him make better decision moving forward. Those are those deal impact sections. See, I used a case study right there for you. Negotiation data points, right? You want to use language that buyers can use to justify price reductions or repair credits. We're not trying to make our report a gotcha report, right? We're not saying that The parking lot's in bad shape, so the seller should repair the parking lot. That is never the language we want to use. We're telling them what's wrong, period. That's it. We don't even want to get into necessarily how things get corrected or fixed if that's outside of our scope. But any sort of language that can help them understand that. I use the example a reserve study. So remember when I was talking about reserve studies being those financial inspections and physical building inspections, they have things called special requirements. So if an HOA were to have a commercial inspection done on their property, they are looking for what they call special requirements. So if we'll go back to the parking lot again, it's easy conversation. If they see the parking lot is in really bad shape and it's going to cost 200 grand to fix, that is a special requirement. So now they have to be able to budget for that repair. So they may make the HOA fees go up, right? They may detract from another feature to fix that one until they can start it back. They may say, hey, it costs this much money to run the pool. Unfortunately, for the summer, we have to shut the pool down so we can take those fees and replace the parking lot, or whatever that looks like, right? But what you're doing is you were able to put language in your report and speak to things in a way that says, hey, this parking lot is in really bad shape. It is not going to be sustainable for a public use parking lot. Replacement should be necessarily done, and now in the next year. That type of language lets them know, oh, this is a really big deal. It's okay to say things are a big deal. If they're a big deal, they're a big deal. We're not scaring anybody away. We're helping our client. We're not worried about if a real estate agent is going to be upset with us or not. That's not at all what our thought process is. Again, you're the trusted advisor here. Give them the advisory tools they need to make a good decision. And then also with these individuals, especially attorneys, a one-page digest for them to absorb fast, like an executive summary page. What I like to say is the first 5 pages of my report is for the board members, and the rest of it is for the maintenance team. Right. So in my first 5 pages of my report, whether I do that on any platform or I write it in Word, you're going to have an executive introductory. You're going to have a list of all the immediate needs. You're going to have a list of what I think are the immediate and long term costs. And then I'm going to give them a few other bits of data, like just what the building is. I have a 2 page document that I fill out that just does highlights of the building and what is there. And if that's all they ever read, then they got as much information as they needed. And I'll show examples of that later in some sample reporting. But what's happening is we're not giving the best information at the appropriate time, and we're losing the opportunity to be very aggressive in our sales toward realtors, or I mean toward attorneys or board members and things of that nature. Because I'll be honest with you, you will sit down at some point with a board of members and discuss your findings. You will sit down with the board of members and discuss your proposal. I did a community college a couple of weeks ago, and the first half of my first day there, I sat there with the principal or the president of the college. I sat there with their lead engineer. I sat there with their both maintenance directors. I sat there with an engineering firm. I sat there with my group, and I sat there with 2 other individuals on a phone call. And it was like a 4.5 hour conversation. I had to be able to present what I was going to do. I had to speak confidently with my ability there. Those things are going to happen. And so being able to put that in executive summary at your report is going to be very helpful, knowing who the audience is and curating that for them. Now, let's get into some objections. We'll take a break here at 11, so hang with me for 20 minutes. I know 2 hours in, sitting at a computer can be daunting. Let's talk about some con objections here, okay? So, we'll negotiate a credit. There's no need to know every issue. So, they're assuming that all risks are negotiable, okay? So they're not as worried about what you find. They're just like, we'll just use it as a credit to knock, the price down. So what you can say is, listen, negotiation power comes from knowledge. So if you want to use me, which I believe you should, I will give you a comprehensive inspection and I will help you to decide when to walk and when to negotiate and when to accept terms with confidence, saving you time and money. Because what they're saying is, if we just do a basic walkthrough and we find something, then we'll just ask for a credit of it. And what I'm saying is, let me give you a fine tuned report that gives you definitive power in your purchasing decision rather than just, we'll just assume things are all negotiable, it'll be easy. That's not always the case. And I have had people come back after the fact when they didn't use us and say, we should have used you. We're in a really bad shape now with this apartment complex or whatever. So let them know the power of your reporting tool. It's a powerful tool. Your report is. The objection, the buyer is handling their own inspection. So let's say it's a broker that you're going after or a real estate attorney, and they say, the buyer's already handling everything, or it's a seller and they don't want to do an inspection, more like this. If it's a seller and they're saying, well, the buyer's going to handle their own inspection, I don't need one. I'm going to say, well, you know what? That's a smart move for them, but you also need your own advocate, right? You need an advocate. And a seller side inspection avoids last minute surprises and it will give you leverage to justify your asking price. That's a big statement. That's a ballsy statement, right? To be able to say, yes, that is smart for your buyer. They should get an inspection. However, you need an advocate. I am that person. Let me avoid and mitigate any issues that come up. Well, the building is being sold as is, so we don't need an inspection. This is an actual rebuttal that I have used in the field. Well, even an as is, transparency builds trust and shortens negotiations. It also limits post closing disputes and liabilities tied to non disclosures. So when people are wanting to not do an inspection because it's sold as is, it doesn't matter if you're going to use that for negotiating purposes. You just need to understand what the building is going to give you from a maintenance perspective, right? So, and like I said, you don't want any post closing disputes or any liability that you didn't know about. So this is an easy one right here. Doesn't matter if it's being sold as is. Your inspection still has just as much weight as whether they were using it for negotiation or not. Okay, so you have the objection here. Inspections slow deals down. They're afraid that if you come in and do an inspection, you're going to screw up the flow of their deal. You're going to give too much information, right? And it's going to change the trajectory of everything. I like to say the opposite. I like to say they're actually going to speed it up because we're going to reduce a lot of back and forth. And with my accurate property data up front, I have found that deals actually close faster with fewer surprises and little to no price drops. I take that verbiage to the bank because I'm not slowing anything down. I'm giving them expediency. I'm saying this is what you have to deal with. There's no back and forth. This is it. Take it to the table, walk away or not. It will keep it going. If they're having to bring out a whole bunch of other professionals, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit, and you have to wait for this guy to send a report and this guy to send a report, that could take months of effort. If you can come in and say, I can exclusively do your inspection, I can look at everything that you need, and I can handle it on the 1 or 2 days I told you I can, I will make your process faster. That is a true statement. And then lastly, here, clients don't want to spend more money during escrow, and we all know this one. This is a softball lob, right? An inspection is often a cheaper resource than any sort of legal cost of post closing disputes and preventative risk management, right? So you say you don't want to spend more money now, but what you don't know will come back to haunt you. Spend the couple of grand now so you don't have to spend the couple of hundred grand later that you didn't know existed. That's always a rebuttal. I don't want to spend the money now. And that's always the comeback, or that's always the objection is, I don't want to spend the money now. And the rebuttal is always, spend a couple of now to save a lot later. Always. That's the easy one. Okay. We'll quickly go through how we're going to find these individuals here. And then we will take a post break. So we already talked about LoopNet and Crexy. Same thing with these individuals. We already know someone is buying and selling because their stuff is listed on LoopNet, right? So if you can see that a building is being sold, it's possible that the building owner might be buying something else. So if you can find out who they are, do sales and go after them. There's another website called Property Radar. Okay, Property Radar. So this is a data tool that's going to provide more or less ownership and property intelligence for targeted prospecting and outreach for people who are selling properties. So like CoStar earlier, that is more for people who already own properties. Property Radar is something that where people are listing and selling it, and it gives you more ownership context. So it's like a CoStar, but for people listing and selling properties. So if you've ever used Property Radar, it's also expensive. It can also be hard to use, but it is a tool that is present if you want to use it. And then LinkedIn, but also LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So you can just have a free LinkedIn account. I do. And just use it by just doing basic research. But if you do something like Sales Navigator or you go to a premium LinkedIn account, this is going to be a tool designed to identify and engage with specific people and prospects through more advanced searches. And you can set up searches and alerts. So if somebody makes a post about something in CRE, or you never hear from the president, but the president made a comment about something or whatever, you can use that as a tool. I think it's like 60, $70 a month. But if you're trying to use that for targeted sales, it's a pretty easy income rather than paying, $800, $900 for like a CoStar or a Radar. I think everyone here, like I said earlier, should get really good at using LinkedIn. It's a very helpful tool. I'm still learning it, so I'm not the professional on it, but it is very helpful. You should certainly understand it. Now, partner referrals. This is what I was talking about earlier. Um, Honestly, just go to your local commercial real estate brokerages, just like you would on Resi if that was something you're used to. Go in there, tell them who you are. A lot of them still don't know that an industry like ours exists. They're still just having them bring a roofer out, an electrician, and a plumber, and that's how they're doing it. Or they're just forgoing altogether because they don't know that you exist. The way to sell to brokers is simply by saying, listen, you work on this deal possibly for a really long time. Bringing in a professional such as myself that can do, A, B, C, X, Y, and Z is going to ensure success in the closure of this deal. And then you start positioning yourself as a partner rather than just a person, passing along a commodity, then it will change the trajectory of your relationship with them. And like I said, when you're drip campaigning them and you're sending them emails or texts or whatever, and you're giving them little nuggets of truth, you're always keeping you in the back of your head. Because traditionally, the transaction for a commercial takes a really long time. Sometimes they'll call and they want it done immediately, but a lot of times it could take a year or more to close on a deal. So these guys and girls really need this to close because that's going to be a massive payday for them. So if you can come in and help them in the process, other than disrupting it, then that's going to be big for them. That's a great sales point. But just go after them, like I said earlier, like we talked about. Go have coffee with them. Just ask them. The lowest rung barrel person, all the way up to the president. Work all the way up to the president. It's very impressive when you get to the president's office and you're like, hey, I've met with your entire team. You got a really solid team of individuals out there. I'd love to pick your brain further on what it took for you to get here and what you see CRE doing or whatever that looks like. Um, that's going to be really impressive. Or start from the top down. If you can get in with the president, then everyone will likely meet with you afterwards. Like, well, if the president of the company met with you for coffee, you must be someone worth having coffee with, right? It can go both ways. Your CCIM institutes and your SIOR institutes. Remember, CCIM is it's a commercial designation. Um, it's going to tell you that people have been doing it for a long time. They maintain a certain level of income, of sales rather, and they had to go through this education. So they're very knowledgeable individuals. They have an institute that you can join again as a member, or you can show up for lunches and different events or sponsor events. I know CCIM always has like a skeet shooting event here. They always have a golf tournament, things like that. You want to sponsor a hole or whatever. If you're new trying to get your stuff out there, then that's a really good opportunity. I would only do it once though. I would not sponsor events all the time unless it's just a massive money making event. I just don't think it's very profitable to do it over and over again. SIOR, so that's the Senior Industrial and Office Realtor Institute. Believe I got that acronym properly. Again, they are individuals who have been in the market for a really long time working. So these are the kind of people that you may want to pick your brain. If you see these designations behind their name, they've been in the game a while. They have a lot to teach you. And then again, other associations, there's going to be local associations, people buying and selling properties, some of those forums and things. Like I said, those investors, they're going to have their own associations. Deeper Pocket has associations, things of that nature. So just look around, do simple Google searches, throw it into Chat GPT what you're looking for, and see what it comes back for. It's a great tool, even more so than Google would be in some instances. Certainly utilize that feature. Um, but that's going to be one of the easiest ways to get into it. Buyers and sellers, unless you're actually looking for the individual owner and you're talking to them and saying, "Hey, I see you're selling a property. Let me help," or "Hey, you bought a property. not too long ago when I see that you're creating a portfolio. Allow me to come alongside you and be an advisor for your portfolio, whatever that looks like. But if you're getting brokers or if you're getting into legal professionals, then simply just reach out to them directly. Send them an email, send them a call, take them to coffee or dinner. That's the best approach. It always has been. And then start those little conversations, and then go to the association events and utilize them as leverage because you've already met with someone. You already have someone to sit next to. You already have someone that can say, "Well, yeah, Lance is already doing that. You should meet Lance," or whatever that looks like. Those are very important tools. Okay, before we break, does anyone have any questions? That was a lot to go through on that. I realize that we're moving through a lot of this stuff, and the whole point of this course is to give you a very entry level basic understanding of it to get your mind going, right? And to start creating different processes for yourself. So I'm going to sit for a second and see if anyone has anything that they want to add as a question or share. You guys are a quiet group. I don't know if I like that or not, but and like I said, buyers and sellers and those type of individuals, you will likely see more of now because you are just getting started. Are your inspections completed solo or as a team? Sam, I have always been a solo inspector. On residential, I had a team. On commercial, right now, I've got one gentleman that's running the field when I'm not in the field. I've always been a solo inspector. Uh, if I needed someone, I'll bring them in, but I've never ran things as a team. So it's efficient to run things as a team, right? You run three people through a multifamily, you guys can get everything knocked out really quickly. But I have never done everything as a team. And as a solo person, I'm a click and shoot inspector. So I will take all the data in the field I need and I'll do the report off site. I don't care how robust a phone app is, it's only going to allow me to do so much until I still need to write stuff at another area. So whether you're in the field with me or not, it really falls down to I did everything solo. I liked doing things solo. I was able to keep things under control more, but it's not always the case. And our team is growing, so I'll tell you later how I feel about being a team. But that's a good question. A lot of y'all are starting off solo. Don't be scared of being solo. Solo is fine. Solo is fine. I would much rather you be a solo inspector but also have a sales and marketing group that helps you out, right? Someone that builds your website, someone that's doing the basic level sales for you, shooting out all those emails, have an admin person, have a team, and that allows you to just be a really good inspector and salesperson because you're going to be the one in the field at those sales events and associating meetings, right? It's going to be you because you know everything about your company. But you don't have time to do sales and marketing at home. You don't have time to be building your website and writing blogs. You're going to have to initially, but the goal would be you can still be a solo inspector, but have a team. So there's the difference. Have you found any benefit to networking with CRE bonding associations or organizations? Somewhat, but I think those things are so particular when it comes to when those things are necessary that I'm always found after the fact just through SEO and being searched for it. I've never had the opportunity to really be at the table of those conversations up front. I've always been a secondary, group that comes in with it. So what Jeff is trying to say with that is there are trade associations. Like I know there's like a CRE, like Finance Council. I had to look them up to see what their acronym is. It's CREFC. They're a trade association dedicated to promoting, liquidity and efficiency in different finance markets. And so that's going to be investors, servicers, other market participants. They're going to have their own groups. Um, and then to go even one step further outside of finance, who's giving all that money, you also have bonding groups that work specifically with just like schools who are going through a bonding issue at a local government level. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But no, I haven't. Should I? Probably. That's a whole other way to get into it. But a lot of these courses that I'm doing now are really based off of my experience. So, most assuredly, someone in this group is going to have experience in other areas that I'm not. And I love to learn. So the more things like that you're like, well, I've done, a CRE bonding association. It worked out really well for me. After the class, shoot me an email. I would love to know more about that because that could be helpful to us or just knowing more about something that I don't have a lot of knowledge on is really exciting to me. So, good question, Jeff. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, I'll tell you what. It is for me 10:58 Central. So we'll just stick on Mountain Standard Time because that's the class we were on. So we'll say it's 10 a.m. right now. Let's come back at 10:15. Let's take a 15-minute. Um, I'm going to mute myself and come off camera. And then when I get back, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, throw it into the chat and I will answer those when I come back. So let's take a quick 15. I'm going to fill up my water and I'll be right back. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. Okie dokie. I see a few questions here, so I can hop into a few of those. So, everybody still hear me okay? Everybody still see the questions on my screen? Make sure we're still good. I didn't try to touch anything when I left. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so you had a question of how often do inspection requests come from the CCPIA website to the local inspectors? Once a quarter, once a year? Well, Devin, that's a good question. That's not something, unfortunately, I can quantify on this call with numbers. I know some people who will get a call from the website or get a lead from the website, and then some never get anything from the website. I think there's a few factors in that. I don't think personally I've ever gotten, but maybe a few calls from the website. Now it's possible that they'll call off the website, but it doesn't go through any channel on the website, so we can't determine if they were from CCPA or not. Um, but like Larry said, you might get a lot locally, but don't rely on that as a single source. The thing with the CCPA website, once you're a member, you obviously want to get your listing on there. That's going to be important for you as a member. Um, and once it's completely filled out, make sure it's in the right place. For example, I believe right now, and I could be wrong, and I apologize for this. You can put your name and listing in three different locations, so many miles apart from one another. So, if you're a member, you should already have that filled out. That should be something that you most definitely should have. That's a very low hanging fruit for yourself. Um, I did have a question. Someone had asked what what's the amount of inspections that I get that are kind of broken up into category. And I'll do some research on that and try to give some numbers tomorrow if possible. But I did say, we don't get as many due diligence clients as we do those who already own property, those who are in portfolios. They might be a third party, like an attorney or something like that. But most of our stuff has been from either us reaching out or they found us online. A stellar website and good SEO will speak volumes for your company. And separating yourself from, if you're a home inspector, home inspections into a commercial website will also be extremely important, I believe, um, because you are going to be signifying that or signaling that this is all you do is commercial, right? You've heard this from us before. So if you are not telling people I just do commercial, this is what I'm all about, then it could be hampering your success. That doesn't mean that you can't have a residential website with commercial stuff on it or vice versa. It's just you want to make sure that people know this is what I do and I know what I'm doing instead of just having a residential website and then putting one little, tab on your residential heavy website and say we also do commercial and then saying some blurb and then a, call us now button. That's not really giving confidence to clients. So if you need to have someone reevaluate your website and how you have things put together, we have members that can help you with that. Absolutely. So because I know some of you have been doing it for a while and some of you are just getting started. So I think it's important that as we go through this, I'm giving some of you brand new knowledge and some of you were, fine tuning your skills and helping you come up with some new ideas for sales. Because that's really the whole point of this course is to understand these clients, but how you're going to do sales to them and how you are going to be successful doing that. And then at the end of this, we'll have a quick recap and we'll go over that together. But does anyone have any other questions they want to throw into the ring about our previous two topics? And maybe you don't have a question, but maybe you have a quick story you want to tell about success you've had, or maybe a failure you had that you're learning from when it came to a building owner or management group or real estate professional, anything like that. Does anybody have anything they would like to share before I move forward? What'd you say was given the suggestion at the start, and I created a totally separate commercial site, and it works decently. Works decently. Is like decently good, decently, or just like it's just okay? What do you mean by that? Um, and Devin, no, I have not used NowSite. Um, but with NowSite and other, platforms, there are a litany of ways for you to streamline your processes for social media and other matters that it's not you having to do, every single thing by yourself. Um, I think tech stacking is one of the most important things a company can do. And you've just got to be able to have some fantastic technology out there and utilize it. Um, Honestly, it's we use probably before I get into this person, Mike Dunn, I have your hand here. I'm going to get to you. We probably use 4 or 5 different softwares collectively to achieve what we're trying to do. I've got I always make sure people fill out a proposal request form online. That's a non sequitur. You have to do that before we even put a proposal and a conversation together. I use a type form for that. And then I also will use 2 different processes for creating my proposals, right? And then we're collecting data in a different CRM like Monday. So it just depends on how you want to go about doing things. I am Mike. I think you're ready to go, buddy.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I was just going to speak to the the point you made earlier, or I believe you made earlier, about being willing, or just even if it's something you're not familiar with, if it's something you can do some research on and get familiar with, be open to things that maybe aren't in your wheelhouse, that you can expand into. Um, a lot of us, I'm sure we all have companies that do sewer scopes, to some extent, but um, and I think Lance, I've talked to you about this, but you know, we um, we got a phone call one day and we were asked if we could push a camera down a pipe and provide video, and we said, yeah, sure, not a problem. Do we need a license? They said no, and we're over 100,000 in that contract already on an Air Force base. We've bought a $70,000 pipe crawler because of it. I mean, it was literally just my willingness to say yes, I can do this. Let me do some quick research and see what I need to accomplish this. And here we are, 100K plus later, and we have this ongoing relationship with a great engineering firm that we have prospects in other states now for other projects based off of
Mm-hmm.
that. Not only that, another one that Lance, you and I talked about briefly before, I know, and I'll just bring it up briefly, and here
Mm-hmm.
people can do their own research, or you guys can touch on it later. But I would highly, highly recommend everybody get through their local accelerator program, or whatever it's called in your region. But everybody, in my opinion, should be, or should have their companies listed on government and state websites for contracting. So both of my companies, the inspection company and my pest control company, we're registered government contractors, registered state contractors, etc. We literally get leads sent to us by prime contractors, the government prime contractors. We'll get jobs sent to us by them just because we're listed in the registry, in our state
Right.
for that NAICS code or whatever. So, and those have led to a lot of projects for us that, again, that those aren't people that are going to go Google a website or whatever, Google looking for somebody in this area. They're just going to jump onto their registry on these, on the federal bid sites and stuff like that. So, um, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot to that. I would recommend people do a lot of research or talk to people about it, but it's something that I would highly recommend because it has led to a lot for at least our companies. Anyways,
Absolutely. That's a good point. Tomorrow, one of our last client types, we're going to get into government work. So
gotcha. Okay.
I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. Again, to use the phrase and beat it like a dead horse, it is low hanging fruit to at least just make sure your company is listed
Yeah.
on a lot of websites and a lot of resources and boards and all of that. Just because it's It may be a small fee, it may be free. It just depends on what they need, but the entry is very low to get into a lot of
Um,
that.
I will make one other point too, or say one other thing that I wanted to bring up. Networking with your local contractors is,
Hmm.
in my opinion, like one of the most important things that you can do as a commercial inspection company, because not only are they a valuable resource to you when you're doing an inspection or setting inspections up or whatever, but I mean they're a valuable lead source too. I mean these contractors, they're the ones getting these service calls, and when they're on service calls they get to hear about other issues. And if you're partnering with these companies like we do with numerous companies in our area, your name gets dropped just as much as theirs do. So we've gotten
Hmm.
a lot of contracts from people calling us up out of the blue saying, hey, so and so was over here and we had this issue, we told him about it, and so he said call you. So again, networking, not necessarily through networking groups, because I think they're a huge waste of time personally, but networking with people, go to networking events and meet these people, have
Hmm.
conversations with them, have coffee, because man, it'll boom your business. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a good considerable mention up in the building owners and managers section. Um, and I'll say that, and then we'll move on. And it's because whenever you build relationships with even like engineering firms or environmental firms or like he said construction groups, they will still be able to utilize you and your resources. For example, we do get calls out of state from a large construction company who does they only do repair and replacement work, major repair and replacement work for schools in their state that are going through bond issues. So they'll have my company come out and do a what they call a level one, which is just a simple inspection and quantify the data so they can write a cost report and then build out repair needs and provide that to the client. So, and that was just because we just built some basic level relationships with them over the year, and that was to our benefit. And we've now had that come through with several different individuals. And I realized, oh, like he said, construction companies, repair people, they need to know who we are. If anyone's ever been in a networking group, I agree it's like Gold Star, I think, and some of these groups. I've never found success in them myself, but what people need to know is that as the inspector, you really are a gate. I'm using that term again. You really are a gatekeeper for other professionals. You really can be a mighty referral source for other professional companies. So building relationships as such with them will be important. Um, and you will find that they will refer business to you, but just out of, hey, we had this need, we can't do it, is this something you can do? Because they also know that I'll refer to them if the time comes. So having a very robust referral group of people that you work with will be very important to you and your success. So that would have been good to mention up in the building owners. I'll make a note to throw that in there as kind of an additional consideration. So um, I'll turn it over to you for one more second, Mike. Go ahead.
Hey, I just had one quick comment on that. When it comes to that, what I have found in the past too, with networking with local contractors, a lesson that I learned along the way is, vet these local contractors yourself, obviously, but also vet them with the the brokers or the realtors that you're dealing with, because I've been involved in numerous transactions where I've brought up, hey, we partner with this contractor. If you'd like, we can bring them in on, and they, oh, we don't like them because of this reason. Like we in this circle, we don't use them, and it's oh, that's information that's critical to know, because you might be partnering with somebody that is a really good company, but if that's not the company that's being used in those circles, it might not be viewed favorably. That's all I wanted to say.
That's a good point. Yep, that is a good point. Yes, that amount. I'll only speak to that because he made a good point, and then I'm going to um, move on. When you are building relationships with other professionals, how I did it initially was I would reach out to, let's say it was a group who did fire safety, so they do annual inspections on suppression systems and extinguishers and stuff. I would say, hey, listen, I want to learn more about what you're doing because I see this in the field when I'm doing my inspections, but I'm also looking for a referral partner. So, is it possible for me to follow you when you do one of your annual inspections? Even suggest giving them payment for it. And what's going to happen is it's going to be twofold. You're going to be able to follow them, see how they do their job. You're going to learn from hands on experience, but then also you're going to see how they conduct business. Because if the people in the field conduct business as a very professional manner, if the owners are really down to earth, great professional people, and you're like, man, I really, really like this group, then you feel confident referring to them and vice versa. If you just only speak to the owners, they may be great people, but the people that they put in the field to represent them may not be. So it's important to understand that vetting everyone through the whole purpose will be important. But I can't stress enough having a strong referral network of people that will be necessary. Okay, so let's dive into leases. So this is something that is an opportunity to make money on, and a lot of people aren't paying attention to it. So this can kind of get into several different types of individuals. So we'll talk about the different lease types and how you can work with those individuals, but also leasing can also go back into what? Back into ownership, right? So you have different types of situations, and then it can go also into insurance and things of that nature. So here's a scenario: you are inspecting an office, and it just happens to be an office, let's say a large office building where there's individual offices all leasing out an office space. You go in, one of them is wanting you to do an inspection. We'll talk about that in a moment. And you find inside their unit, they have a lot of roof leaks. There's issues with that. Their electrical is outdated, whatever you want to say, right? And you go, you know what? I bet this is a value added to other individuals in the building. So it's cool to be able to then go knock on a door of another company in that same building and say, hey, I just did this inspection. These are the things I found. I wonder if you have the same problems, and upsell them and do another inspection. You could do it at a lower rate. You're already there. But that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you have the building owner, right? So you can say, I did an inspection inside your property. These are the things I found. I understand that your lease, tenant is responsible for so much, but some of this stuff falls on you. Let's talk about an interest of having an inspection done for you, and then also you have insurance, right? It's one thing to find out who the insurance company is for that group, or property management group. And there's two other ways to do inspections, and we'll talk about insurance tomorrow. But we already talked about property management, what they need, right? So it's one thing to just think this is just a very singular building experience for inspection, but it's another thing: who are all the players involved, and is there an opportunity for me to work with each of them? That's going to be important, because if that be the case, then you'll be surprised how many other avenues of revenue that you can garner by thinking of the right people. So that's one way. When it came to lease tenants, I was just simply getting calls about these type of tenants and needing inspections, and I didn't even think about it, right? Because they're not buying the property, but they are going to spend money monthly, annually, whatever, at this property, and they need to understand if it's going to be a good investment for them or not. If you've ever been in an area where they have a bunch of office buildings, but they're just not well kept, people are going to be walking into maintenance issues, whether they realize it or not, accessibility issues, whatever, and we can also be an individual that can help them navigate that process. So let's go into this and let's break this down. Okay, so who are they? So we're going to talk about um, three different types. We're going to talk about triple net tenants. We're going to talk about double net, and then we're going to talk about what we call modified gross, which is just a hybrid. Um, Triple net tenants, okay, those are going to be the tenants that are actually going to pay for the property taxes. They're going to pay for the insurance and the maintenance. And in addition to that, they're also the one paying for rent and utilities. The landlord's responsibility is actually very minimal. And it's typically just like structural repairs or a roof or maybe a big parking lot, something like that. Um, most common spaces like kitchens, bathrooms, and all that maintenance falls on the triple net lease tenants. So it really allows the landlord to have a little responsibility. Um, the tenant perspective, usually you're going to get a lower base rate because they're responsible for so much. Um, but of course, because they have so much responsibility, there's going to be more ongoing costs. So it's one thing to pay a high premium and have no responsibility than to pay a low premium and have a lot to take care of. That's what a triple net lease is going to be. That's why we can be very helpful to them. Um, you're usually going to find triple net leases in, I'll come back to that in a second, Mike. You're usually going to find triple net leases in standalone retail, some industrial. I've seen it, and then just single tenant properties where someone's renting out their office space or something of that nature. Um, Usually, it's not going to happen at government agencies or schools or public places, or it might be like a church is renting a building or something. But a lot of those lease agreements can change from person to person. Now, I will say this before we move on to the next one, because it really pertains to all of them. It is possible for you to ask the owner to review the lease, um, especially if you're working on behalf of the owner. I will talk about the owners in a minute, but just keep that in mind that this is not one of those things where you're like, well, I'm never going to get to see the lease, so I don't know how I'm going to be helpful to them, or this seems like a lot of paperwork, or it seems like a lot of things outside of my scope. And while reviewing a lease is outside of the scope of what CCPIA would say is your inspection standard, it is something that understanding how lease agreements read, understanding who's responsible for what, who the players are, all that will be necessary. Um, I'm going to finish these types and then I'll answer your questions. Then we have double net. So double net lease in a double net lease. In a double net lease, the tenant pays for property taxes and the insurance. So while the landlord covers structural maintenance, sometimes they'll cover some common areas. So really, it's just one lower rung, right? So they're paying for taxes and insurance. Most of the needs are being covered by maintenance for the owner. But they also lump in some common area expenses. You will probably only find triple nets in most of the occurrences that you come across. Um, so landlord responsibility for a double net lease, usually structure, exterior, and some common spaces like they may repair the bathrooms, something like that. And the tenant, their more cost is going to be like a standard lease. But again, like I said, just a little less than what triple net might offer. Now, these are going to be mostly common in the same thing: multi-tenant buildings, office properties, things of that nature. That's where a lot of these leases are going to be. Um, the age doesn't matter for these type of leases, the age of the building, right? Let's talk about modified gross because the age will come into effect with that. So a modified gross, this is a lease that's more of a hybrid where the landlord will cover some things and the tenant will cover other things. And these are usually just agreed upon in the agreement. It's not a necessarily a stagnant, I'm always going to take care of this, you're always going to take care of this. Thus, that's a modified gross. It really depends. The landlord usually will take care of taxes and insurance and the big structural maintenance, and the tenant will do more predictable costs. So they'll have fewer responsibilities, but obviously they're paying their monthly rent. And then again, this is more common in offices and older buildings with mixed use tenants. Because if it's an older building, you might be able to come in and say, you know what, this building is just really poor shape. Or, I realize that the roof needs to be repaired or the parking lot's like this. I don't want responsibility for that. They may do a modified gross. Um, if you're familiar with classes like Class A, B, C type buildings, you might find a lot of modified gross in Class C, but Class C has a lot of triple net too, and that's really where we can come in a minute. Because if you're a triple net lease in a Class C building, you have a lot of responsibility, and that building has a lot of needs, and it's really going to dampen how you run your business. Okay, so before I move on, I've got two questions. I see Michelle, then I'll hop up to Mike. Michelle said, "Do larger systems like HVAC usually fall on the tenant or the landlord?" They usually fall on the tenant. They usually fall on the tenant from what I've been noticed. It can go both ways, but most of it is the tenant's responsibility. So landlord, the landlord will know how well those systems operate. They know the age of it, etc. But usually some of that falls on the tenant. But again, that's going to be important to understand if somebody reaches out to you and says, I'm going to lease this office and I want you to do inspection on it. That's why I say you need to understand how to read lease agreements so you know what you can and can't help them with. Because here's the big thing, too. If, let's say, for example, the landlord is responsible for HVAC, but the tenant is doing an inspection on the property, they still want to know, obviously, if that HVAC is in good shape or not. Because even though they don't have to be the ones to fix it, if they see that all the HVAC equipment's in really bad shape and that the business owner is just running a slum, then they probably don't want to rent from them, right? So you're still looking at it the same. It's just you're referring to different people with the evidence that you find. Um, Out of curiosity, has anyone at CCPA considered entering discussions with BOMA to create some sort of industry standard inspection that integrate our inspection services with their needs, data sets? If not, would it be an idea to consider? Yes, Michael, it is an idea to consider, and it is on my radar. So as we get into more discussions like this, I'm going to find how I can insert CCPA into as many of them as possible. So yes, good question. Okay, let's discuss their key needs. Okay. So the key needs here is they are going to need clarity on the repair responsibilities, right? This is one of those things where we're getting out of they're buying a property. Let's just quantify things, or let's give them a big overview. When it comes to this, they're going to have exact needs. So a cost to cure report may not be beneficial here to them because it's an opinion of cost. They're going to want to know exact needs. Um, they have to understand who's responsible for which repairs, and they need to be based on the lease agreement. So clear repair responsibility. It's going to reduce obvious disputes. Ensure timely maintenance, and it's going to protect both parties. And that's going to be important too. If somebody is wanting to have their property inspected because they are leasing it, but the tenant, or I mean the landlord doesn't want them to have an inspection, like we do our own inspections. There's no need to get an inspection. Then they probably shouldn't get that property, right? They probably shouldn't rent that office if the landlord's not willing to allow them to get an inspection done. Um, but you have to be able to keep people accountable, and so you have to be clarifying on your reporting. We'll talk about reporting in a minute, but repair responsibility is extremely important. Upfront condition. So upfront condition awareness. So, they have to have a detailed understanding of a property's physical condition before they can lease and buy or sell it. So this is going to allow for obvious decision making and better budgeting and fewer surprises. So there is no let's project over the next couple of years because they're going to want projections. If I'm renting a space, right, and I'm responsible for most of it, it's going to be a nice to have to know. Okay, so you're telling me today I don't have to replace the HVAC, but in 5 years I will. Got it. That's good. But it's also important for them to know the exact condition the day they get into it. So the immediacy is going to be, I think, more important than the projection of what could happen. Because in the immediacy, it's going to be like, listen, today here's what you're going to have to take care of, and this is how it's going to affect your business over the next however many months as you get in it. Because it may be where they can get into the lease, but there's so many repair or maintenance needs that were deferred from the last individual that there's no way they're going to be able to operate business. And that's another thing. You may not know how a restaurant operates their business, but if they're leasing a space, you understand how leasing works, right? You've done the research on it. You understand what everyone's going to be responsible for per their agreement. And you can at least say to that restaurant, hey, you already have 40 grand worth of repairs that need to go into just this rental space here. Because sometimes we might just be thinking of a little 200 square foot office. Think of, when you're leasing things, you go to a big shopping center, right? You go somewhere where there's a big sports store or a big Walgreens or whatever. They're probably leasing those buildings. I know for a fact that Amazon leases their buildings, they do not own their buildings. So if you're leasing that big of a property, right, there's a lot of factors that go into it. They need to know the immediate upfront condition. And then compliance is going to be very important to these individuals. So we're talking making sure that things are legal, making sure things are safe, any sort of regulatory standards that you might know of. We're looking at building code like accessibility is going to be really important here. Fire safety, life safety, environmental, all of that needs to be taken in consideration when you're doing this for them. They have to stay compliant because a lot of these are going to be forward facing fronts for customers coming in. Okay. And so this is a great way to do a lease inspection, but also do an inspection for the owner. Because let's say that they're doing a lease inspection and I find out that there is no accessible parking and there's no actual way for anybody to get up on a curb and walk on a sidewalk and get to their entrance. And that's going to create a problem for the tenant. But now that creates a bigger problem for the owner of the building because the tenant is just renting what? They're renting what is there right now. The owner is now going to be responsible one step forward and say, listen, you don't have accessibility standards here in place. That's going to be a problem for the people trying to rent from you. Then you can pitch an inspection for them on that or whatever that looks like. So don't forget, there's multiple players involved when it comes to something. Um, but if you don't understand compliance, again, if you're going to do certain building inspections, really understand to the best of your ability within your limits and reason what compliance and legal and life safety and regulatory things are in place. That will be extremely beneficial to you. And you're not going to know it all at once. You're going to learn that stuff as you go. There's still a lot of that that I don't know, but I'm very familiar with a lot of it on the buildings I'm most comfortable with because I've done the research. Okay. When we are doing sales and marketing to these individuals, um, there's a few different ways we can do it. And I'll break these down for each of you like I have in the last few. But I think it's also important to state that you can do this during different processes. So, for example, someone might be about to lease a building, so they'll reach out to you. Maybe someone is already leasing a building, but you can reach out to them all the same and say, hey, I know you're already in a lease agreement, but we can still do an inspection for you, similar to building owners, and give you an idea of how these systems are operating so that you can, budget and plan accordingly. So it doesn't have to just be when someone's leasing it. Same with someone, who just owns the property. We go back to ownership. They may have a bunch of leases. And so something that I have pitched before in the past and I've had some success is if someone is either buying a property with a lot of lease tenants or they already own the property with a lot of lease tenants, I will say, allow me to inspect the property from your perspective of what you're responsible for, and then allow me to evaluate the leases that are inside the building and let me make sure that everyone is being accountable for their responsibilities. So, I get a twofold inspection, right? I get to look at the whole building as a whole like I already would, but I'm coming at it from two different angles. That's going to be important. I have had insurance companies reach out to me and say, hey, we have a big shopping center. It's in really poor condition and we think it's being managed poorly. And we're just going to go ahead and get a real estate attorney and just have you go out there and inspect the property. And now I was inspecting it from three different positions, right? So you just never know what that's going to look like. So with sales, their value proposition is they want to avoid hidden costs to their bottom line. Okay, that's the biggest thing. I have to operate inside this building. I'm renting it, so if I do a 5-year lease, I'm in this thing for 5 years unless I spend an egregious amount of money to get out of it, which is usually not the case. So I have to avoid any hidden costs right now. So that is your biggest value proposition to them. That's what I said. We were talking about the immediacy. What's the health of it right now? That's what they need to know. A good way to do sales for this is to educate brokers and lawyers and all those involved on the importance of tenant inspections. Here's the deal. We're going to talk about objections and rebuttals and all that in a moment, but you're going to get some pushback because this isn't necessarily something that happens often, but it is something that should be taking place. Um, right? It's one of those things that it just seems natural that if you're going to rent a space for a certain amount of time, excuse me, and somebody is responsible for a portion of that building, you want to hold them accountable, right? And you want to know that you have what you need to take care of what you're responsible for. So it's just a given. These should be something that happen all the time, and unfortunately, they're not. A lot of people can't afford sometimes getting into a small office space. Now, if it's just a small office, like for example, personally, we're moving out of our home and I'm looking for a small office to put my stuff in an office out of. I'm only looking for like a 200-300 square foot space, right? There's just four walls and a window. There's really nothing there for me. I'm in an office space with probably 100 other businesses. Probably not going to be your client type for this. But if someone is getting in a big shopping center or a strip mall and they have a lot of responsibility and a lot of real estate to deal with, this is more what your client's going to look like. But you let people know what you do. Like I said earlier with brokers, a lot of them don't realize that the services we offer even exist. And so we have to get in front of many people as we can to let them know. Same goes for this, right? We still have to educate brokers like this is still a good idea to have this done. Same with real estate attorneys. Real estate attorneys obviously love to avoid any sort of issue and any sort of litigation or major red flags that could come through. So let's say, for example, if you're just a local Chinese restaurant and you're renting something in a strip mall, you're probably not going to have any sort of legal representation. But if you are a Walgreens and you are getting into a strip mall, they'll probably have legal representation, right? So that's one other factor. You're doing it for the attorney and the owner. So when you're looking at a lease tenant, really pay attention to all the parties involved at different stages, right? A small business, probably just themselves and the landlord. A really big business, something prestigious and a big Class A or Class B unit, right? There could be attorneys, there could be brokers involved, there could be the actual client involved. We have the landlord involved, the landlord's attorney, insurance companies. There could be five or six hands putting their hand on this deal. So pay attention to that and just know that you could be getting a call based on your service area from any one of those to do just this very inspection here. So don't think, why is there an attorney calling me on behalf of someone else who's renting an office? Just know there's plenty involved. Okay, so with the sales also, I would try and bundle pre and post inspection services. Okay, so like I said earlier, you can hit them on both or you can get them at different times. But if they're coming to you before they actually lease the property, or it's the owner and they say, "Hey, we have all these lease tenants. I need to make sure everyone's accountable." Same both ways. You can say, let me do an inspection initially for you now, and then I can come back out, in a year or whatever, and do another inspection to see how things are operating, to catch back up on the property, whatever that looks like. Sometimes I like to do that when I say, okay, listen, you're about to lease this property and you've got old HVAC. It's going to go sooner than later. I don't think it needs to be replaced today, but you really need a budget for it. But also, you don't have ADA accessibility. Told your owner, we'll see what happens. I'll tell you what, why don't I come back in a year or 6 months or next quarter and I'll do another inspection and see how everything's working. Sometimes that can work. Sometimes that can be a sales strategy. Doesn't work all the time, but it is plausible to do that, especially if you find significant things. You can do this in one of two ways. When you put your proposal together, you can just do it already, kind of like a tiered inspection proposal. And I recommend anytime you're doing a proposal, you're always giving multiple prices. So there's kind of a base, mid tier, whatever that looks like. But you can offer them a pre and post inspection service bundle. Or it could be an upsell after the fact. So you've done the initial inspection right, you find some things, and you say, "I think it'd be in your best interest." And in three more quarters, I come back out and we evaluate this thing again, whatever that looks like. Especially if they are going to be renewing their lease. Let's say they only have a 1 year lease or something like that. Say, "Hey, let me come back at the end of it and see how things are, and we'll see if it's going to be in your best interest to renew this lease or not." When we are doing marketing, okay, the content that's going to be great for them is infographic on lease types and hidden responsibilities along with case study numbers. Okay, so you can get on a site like Canva, or you can even dump it into Chat GPT, honestly, and ask it to create an infographic on different lease types. So let's say it's a triple net lease on a shopping center, and you want to create some sort of nifty infographic that depicts the common types of issues that they may have with their responsibilities. And then you can run some figures with it. So you can say, an HVAC system on a building like this could cost you 8 to 12 grand for replacement. And here's this, and this, a water tank could cost you, 2 grand to replace, or, your electrical panel's in the wrong spot or it's outdated and you don't have to replace it now, but this or this, whatever. I find that this kind of marketing is really helpful. Now you can use this on any client type, but anytime you are trying to, let's be honest, trying to convince somebody that they need something where they otherwise don't pay attention to an inspection, say for leases, giving them something very clear, very tangible, very here's a picture with some colors and some some quick blurbs about stuff. This is very helpful to email people in a campaign if you were, which goes into the different channels that we're going to talk about. So, email campaign to tenants. Okay. The thing is, if you go and you go through a shopping center, so if you have, CoStar or something, you can look this up easier. But let's say you just go to your local shopping center and you look at all the different clients or all the different tenants that are present. You can figure out who owns them, and you can shoot them an email and say, "Hey, I don't know how far along you are in your lease, but this is what we do. This is what we've done for other tenants such as yourself, and this is a success that they've had." And then upsell them on something as far as an inspection goes. You can also email campaign any sort of the representative broker. So you're going to have brokers in commercial that just do specific building types. So a home inspection, you're going to come across a real estate agent who will literally represent any type of home, right? They want to make money. But in commercial, a lot of them are very specific in their representation. So someone may just do industrial or just office or just light office or light industrial or shopping centers or whatever. And some of them just broker um, lease agreements. So they're not actually selling the property. They're consistently trying to get people into lease agreements. And they're the liaison between the owner and the lease. They're kind of the property management group, if you will. There are brokers that do that. So when you're doing your email campaign to brokers, make sure that it's talking about people who have existing properties, buying and selling, and lease agreement tenants. Those type of inspections, because there are plentiful of brokers that you can use when it comes to that process. Um, Co-working space managers, that's something to also take into consideration. So there are co-working spaces all over the place now, and some of them are starting to operate similar to a office lease tenant space. So, you're renting out an office for a month or two. You may not have responsibility as the renter for any maintenance, but if you own that property, if you are maintaining or managing that property, you're going to want to know what issues are happening, because people are not going to rent your space as a business if your building has ongoing issues. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have ongoing issues, and similar to the HOA situation over at the apartment complex, you're going to have ongoing issues, but now you're going to have to raise monthly rents because the parking lot's in bad shape or whatever, or you're not being you're proactive, you're being reactive. So those are also ways to do sales and marketing to any sort of co-working space manager. I have found that a lot of those representative brokers who are doing it for office spaces and such, they're also doing it for co-working. So if you're ever going after a large broker like a big CBRE or anything of that nature, then you can ask them what are all the different things that you guys are managing and go from there on a sales perspective. So the message here is very simple, right? We will help you lease smart, not blind. That's the marketing message behind everything you're doing. Remember, back to our value proposition. We're avoiding hidden costs to your bottom line, right? You're leasing smart, not blind. And a lot of this pertains just to those who are leasing a property. Honestly, the owners, we've talked about them a lot, but they are more on the other section of owners, building the owners. When it comes to lease tenants, we have worked with industrial clients who are leasing a large industrial space all the way down to a tiny little restaurant and a little strip mall, to somebody who is starting a little salon parlor in an office park, whatever you can think of. People are leasing left and right for all different reasons. And especially right now, leasing an office or a space like that is very cost effective. So the price has gone down because we have a lot of office buildings and a lot of centers that have very little presence because of COVID and just our economy over the last few years. So you are going to find that there will be opportunities for you to reach out to those owners and say, "Hey, let me provide you value by going through, inspecting your property, and telling you the issues so you can correct them and start getting more lease tenants." or you're going to be working with more lease tenants because people are going to be going back to getting an office or whatever that looks like, especially now that it's much cheaper to do so. So take that in consideration with the market right now. I believe, based on what I see on the horizon, that commercial office spaces, things of that nature, are going to be hot, and people are going to start leasing more because most people still want to keep running businesses. They just don't want to own their own building, right? So you're going to find more lease contracts out in the future. Okay, let us take a second and let us dive into their reporting needs. Um, I will say this before we get into this with in terms of reporting. I mentioned earlier that I don't have a particular report writing software that I'm using. What you have to understand is it doesn't necessarily matter the report writing software you use. It's how everything is structured. So what you guys have seen, if you've done report writing, you've either come from a background that is construction management or project management, and your reporting is really a few Word documents where you're doing summarizations and then you're putting a price on there. And then you'll just have pictures that are annotated, like Company Cam does something like that. You may be used to that type of reporting, or you might be used to something from the home inspection side where it was like Spectora or HIP or something of that nature. And it was a very simplistic, same kind of format where it was here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's the subcategories. And then, in the field, I can click this and put a picture and I'm good to go. Oh, I have a big canned statement somewhere. I can add that in. In commercial, it's very different. You can have canned statements loaded up. You can use what you've already been using. But what people are finding right now is there are no report writers that are specifically geared for commercial that we can afford. There are specific commercial report writing softwares out there, like, for example, Quire, Quire is one of them. But you're also going to find that it's, 4 or 5 grand a quarter to have that. So it's not feasible for us starting out. So sometimes just creating a Word document might be the best thing for you. When we get to the end of this course, if I have time, I will pull up a sample engineering report and show you some things that I was talking about that I found to be beneficial for me, if we have time. If not, I'll send you some samples. But don't get so bogged down on what type of reporting software you're going to use. Just make sure that you're trying to create the reporting standard that your client is going to need. Okay. So, with the reporting needs of lease tenants, they need report or they need responsibility clarity. Okay. So they need to clearly distinguish the tenant landlord responsible components. And if you evaluate their lease agreement, okay, you evaluate their lease agreement, you can tell who's responsible for what. And I would outline that in the report, right? You may make another section that just says landlord responsibilities. And you may say, based on the agreement that was provided during our pre inspection walkthrough, we determined that the landlord is responsible for the following items. The following items were X, Y, and Z. The health of the following items were as such on the day of the inspection. And then you tell them what that looks like. So if the landlord is responsible for the parking lot and it's in bad shape and my clients can't park there or there's no ADA accessibility, that's a problem, right? They're either going to have to lower that rent or they're just going to have to walk. So make sure that you clarify who's responsible for what in the report. Maybe in your executive summary, you have a blurb in there, right? And you say something about, based on our review of the agreement, here is the responsibility of both parties, and then you just do a quick list of them. And then you just go down and do a normal report. And so if they're looking at the HVAC or whatever and they go, oh, okay, the HVAC is in really bad shape, they can go back up to the top and go, oh, I see here that it's a landlord's responsibility. So, okay, that makes sense. They need to take care of it or whatever. As long as you have it distinguished and you clarify it, you'll be fine. As is conditions. Okay. So, thorough documentation of properties to avoid any future issues. Okay. So, like we said on some other projects, you have to give them an as is day of picture. They need to be able to look at the report, anybody, okay? And they need to be able to see on that report, even if it's 2 years down the road in the lease, they can look at the report and definitively say, this was the health of everything the day that we started, right? And this is something they can use toward their landlord as well. So they can say on January 1st, 2025, we got an inspection done by Focus Building Inspections. They outlined everything in the condition as it was, and they told us how we needed to project ourselves and get ready for future issues. Well, here we are, 2 years later. The roof is now failing, and we're getting leaking inside, and I have mold issues, and I'm repeatedly, replacing ceiling tiles. This is your responsibility based on the lease. They also reviewed the lease. It's inside the report as well. So they can go back and they can utilize that going forward. So make sure you capture the property as best you can on the day of the inspection and convey it in your report. Three, system function checks. This is one of the unit, or this is one of the inspections where you really want to operate all the stuff as much as possible, especially if they're trying to lease a new property. It's probably going to be vacant, so you're not worried about disrupting someone's business. Or if there is business already operating in a space and they're going to be taking it over, that business knows that there's going to be testing and they're just going to have to get prepared for it. Normally, if I'm doing an inspection and there is a tenant already in the inspection, it could be twofold, right? Maybe they own the building already. So if they own the building already and I'm just doing a general overview inspection for them, I'm not going to probably run the HVAC systems, right? I'm not going to electrical panels and pull dead front covers off. Honestly, that's beyond the ComSop, and I don't think you need to do it anyways, unless it's like a vacant apartment, because that system's so small for a sub panel, right? Anything that's going to alter or affect or possibly screw up someone's business operation, right? You're not going to go into a dialysis clinic and go find the electrical panel and then start taking covers off, right? You're not going to go to a dialysis clinic and they have the temperature at a nice 69 degrees and you go in there and you crank it up to 80 to test the heat or whatever, right? You're not going to do those things. And if you are, you shouldn't. I don't recommend them. But on a standard lease inspection, right, they need to know how everything operates because that's going to go back into the agreement and negotiability. So make sure you are actually testing everything and just do it from its basic standpoint, right? On an HVA system on a rooftop unit, I may go down below and manipulate the thermostat and see that okay, the thermostat's on. I put it on to 70. It was whatever, and then I'll go and find the unit on top, make sure it's operating. But I'm not taking doors and stuff off because if you screw something up again and you actually mess the system up, that's still on you. If it's an electrical panel and it's safe to do so, I may remove a cover to look at the wiring on the inside. They may have done a poor job doing maintenance, whatever that looks like. Really test those things and the function of them. Number four, projected issues. Um, Document systems likely to fail mid lease. Okay, so we want to do the as is condition, right? Here's what we're dealing with the day of. But on this, you also want to be able to give them not really a cost to cure necessarily, but just a projection. So if you know something is within just a couple of years of the end of its life, you may not realistically be able to say, I think today you should replace this, but you most definitely in the next couple of years need to be ready for this thing to go out, right? Or whatever that looks like. If you feel confident in that and you can definitively find those things, then most certainly you should be putting those in your report. And I would probably have a section that just talks about projected issues. Okay. This is what I'm talking about when you're giving them a few pages up front, right? So you may have an upfront document that talks about the responsibility. Then you may have the next page that talks about the as is condition the day of the inspection. Here's what we found. Here's the major issues. And then you may have the next section be the projected issues. So then you say, over the next 5 to 10 years, we expect these things to be needs. This is what they look like, whatever. And then if you need to do any sort of repair forecasting, you can. But honestly, cost to cure is going to be difficult here because again, that's an opinion, and I think they need exact numbers. So it may be where you have to go one step further and say, okay, today I found all these issues. Now I'm going to go get you exact numbers from repair professionals so that you can, pair that with our report, or I'll provide it in the report for you, whatever that looks like. And I always know going into this, that's going to be a part of my conversation with them during the pre-inspection conversation, right? So I already know I'm going to be doing a lease inspection for them. I'm telling them, hey, hard numbers are going to be important for you. So while I'm going to charge you 5 hours to be in the field and 3 hours to do the report, I'm going to charge you an additional 3 hours because I'm going to be reaching out to other contractors to get you hard numbers. So this is your total. And a lot of them are going to say, perfect, because they are relying on you to be the advisor. So go be the advisor, take the extra time and collect good numbers. Cost to cure may not be what you need here in this circumstance. A cost to cure would be great for the building owner, right? As they just operate basic things of it. But for the lease tenant who's responsible very much for their particular things over a short period of time, you may not be able to offer that to them. Um, it is important when you're doing your reporting for this to keep it very simple. Okay. I would remove a lot of the extra fat. I would remove a lot of the extra pictures and only put things in it that really matter so that you can paint a very clear picture. Now, I've never again gotten in trouble for the amount of pictures or verbiage or numbers or anything I used in the report. I just think in commercial, you have to be very succinct and to the point when it comes to reporting. And this is the type of report that is that. This isn't going to be a 50-page report. This is going to be a lot of explanation, and it's going to be a lot of straight to the point needs. So I'll quit beating that horse there. All right, let's talk about common objections. And as you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chats or save them for me in a minute. I will preface this when I finish this up here momentarily. We'll still have a little bit of time. I see that, which is great. I'm going to turn the floor over to y'all and I'm going to ask very specific questions. And it may not be regarding some of these things, but business in general. And we're going to have some one on one time. So I hope that will be helpful. Okay, so objections. Let's break down the objections. It's the landlord's building, not my responsibility, right? This is them speaking out of ignorance, not stupidity, ignorance, right? Some people think, well, I'm just renting it from them. I'm not responsible for some of those things. You have to understand that there is cause and effect. Okay. So, like your lease may say otherwise. Triple net or modified gross leases often make tenants responsible for HVAC or plumbing and more. So, an inspection is going to help you avoid inheriting someone else's neglect. That's a good rebuttal. But you also have to take into consideration, let's say, for example, they aren't, because Devin, you asked, they aren't responsible, or I'm sorry, Michelle asked this, they aren't responsible for HVAC and they're not responsible for the roof. But if the roof is failing and the HVAC is in poor shape and it's leaking or whatever, um, the tenant needs to obviously know that, right? So while that thing may not be their responsibility, you need to let them know that some things will directly correlate to their building space and it may affect their maintenance needs. And at that point, they have to take that and put the onus back on the building owner to do some corrections or walk away, don't rent from that space. Um, like I said, let's help them not go in blind and avoid inheriting someone else's neglect. We walked the space ourselves and it looked fine. Often these are individuals who either don't know a inspection is a actual option for them. They weren't told it was. Sometimes these building owners won't tell them, yeah, you should go get an inspection because they think everything's hunky dory in what they're offering. Or they're like, it's so much cheaper than, everywhere else. You get what you get kind of scenario. Um, but one of the best rebuttals here is listen, visual checks don't reveal underlying problems, right? My inspection is going to uncover what's behind things that are going to become your bill later. Now, we're not going to be invasive, but what I mean by that is they're not going to know the life expectancy of an HVAC system, likely, right? They're not going to understand the health of their electrical systems and their plumbing systems. That's all important because remember, the plumbing lines may or may not be their responsibility. And so if you have a public use space, let's say it's a strip mall, and this is something else to take into consideration too when it comes to we walk the space. Let's say it's a long strip mall and you are going to be doing an inspection on a strip mall that's on the very far right, but the very far left, 3 doors down, is a clinic and there is a lot of traffic in this clinic. If your sewer lines connect at some point and their sewer line connects directly into yours and can cause problems, we all know that a public clinic, people are going to be sticking all sorts of stuff down the toilet, right? So, and this is a clinic that is, let's say it's a health clinic. So they're putting personal things down there, they're flushing possible drugs, whatever it looks like, right? And that could be affecting your drain sewer lateral as well. It's important to know who's responsible for that. Um, and they may not see that or pay attention to it because to them they're just looking at the physical space in front of them and not the things that might be hidden that necessarily we can't look at without going further, but is important for them to understand. Um, the landlord says everything is in working order. Right. This is like building a brand new construction home and the builder telling you everything's going to be fine. We already did our blue tape walkthrough, right? We all have that. No. So they may believe that, but verifying protects you. Inspections are going to create documentation that can be used to resolve disputes or negotiate pre lease repairs or help you with things down the line. Remember what we were talking about here, right? Figuring out that as is condition and the projected issues. That's what comes in right here. It is possible that the landlord thinks their building's in okay shape. I've done those inspections where they're like, I don't think it's as bad as you think it's going to come up to. And then you get there and it's way worse. And it's because they don't know anything about buildings. They just know how to lease spaces out. So it's important for them to be able to have that information so they can do pre-negotiations or rebuttals down the line. And then we've never had an inspection for previous leases, right? And I always tell them, hey, listen, that's common. And also, while, many tenants, excuse me, I say that's common. And as a lease gets more complex, due diligence matters more. And it's simply a small investment in peace of mind. So, what I'm trying to say with that is maybe you've leased something before and you just had a really great moment, right? It was a honeymoon moment. The building owner was fantastic. All your needs got met. But now you're going to another space or a new building. It may not be that circumstance, right? Different owner, different building, different needs. Just because they've done the process before and it went smoothly doesn't mean it's going to go smooth in the future. So it's going to be important that you can walk through that with them. Honestly, with the objections on this, they all kind of sound the same for this. And it's really just like, listen, I'm just renting the space. It's not my building. It's not my responsibility. And you have to let them know you have responsibilities and help me understand what those are so that we can keep everybody accountable. That's the best overcome objection. But that's really going to be the majority of the objections is that statement there. Okay, so let's talk about where to find them. Okay. So we have ROFO, ROFO. So this is actually going to track office and retail tenants and leasing activity. Okay. Again, back to that kind of CoStar type thing that we have. These things are available. They're not cheap, but they are available. You can track everything that's going on with the retail space. So who's renting it, and you can even use things like CoStar to do the same thing. But ROFO is more specific. You have something like 42 floors. Some of you have probably heard of that. And this is just listing companies who are searching for office space. So this is actual registry of people saying, I need to find this type of office space. And they'll put that online. And then brokers can go look for them and then offer them what's available. So that's a good way for you to figure out who's out there looking for leases. And then look at the advertisements on that website as well, because that'll also tell you who are some of the brokers who are helping them out. So it's pretty twofold on what you can do with something of that nature. Um, but I believe just a couple of years ago, 42 floors got purchased out by someone else. So I think it might be Yardi now, YARDI, after I look at it. So you're either looking for 42 floors or Yardi, um, something like that would be what you're looking at. But also, there are other instances of organizations like 42 Floors. So that's just a broker list that you can go look at. And then really local economic development agencies. Okay. So you're going to have agencies that may offer business directories of tenants by region. Okay. And these are like government or nonprofit organizations that work to attract and retain and grow business with a specific region by promoting investment and offering incentive and supporting real estate development and serving as connectors between property owners and developers and stakeholders and such. So there's going to be other local agencies that may have been created similar to ROFO or 42 Floors, but it's just directly associated with your region. So again, this is why it's important to build relationships with what? Those property management groups, the brokers, investors, things of that nature, because they're already going to be in tune to these organizations that you can easily join or pay a small fee and sit in on the forums or whatever so that you can learn. And then those are all great opportunities to do sales and find individuals to do work with. Um, and honestly, when it comes to leases, I have this on here, but like I said earlier, you can just go look at buildings or go look at, if you ever go walk into a multiplex building office, you can go into the entry and you can see where there's a placard that has all the businesses in it. Take a picture of it and then go back and look up who those business owners are and just say, hey, this is what I do for a living. And then go to the owner and then look up who the insurance agent is, right? Go You have to open your mind up and think there's at least 5 lanes everywhere that I can take for commercial. Even with people who are buying, even with people who own, even with lease tenants and situations like this, you have to understand that you literally can take it in any direction. And that's why I said earlier, and I stand by this, that if you were in an area and there's 10 of you in that area, right? All 10 of you could be doing something vastly different for commercial and all be successful. This can all be successful for you as long as you're willing to do the work and put the effort into it, right? You're going to fail. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times as you try to figure this out, but you have to be consistent with it and you have to find your niche and you have to just run in that lane and you will find success with this. I guarantee it. I only know that because I have seen it happen for myself and other companies. There are companies who just do due diligence. There are companies who just work with churches, or just work with industrial, or just work with portfolios and REITs because they know how to speak finance language, learn those systems, learn those processes, and apply them. Um, you know what? Lastly, for partner referrals, again, commercial brokers, we talked about that. There are things called franchise disclosure documents or FDDs. So franchises will often lease properties and they will list these out in monthly publications. So they'll say, this franchise leased out a new portfolio or whatever. And those will often need inspections. And if they don't need inspections because the deal's already done, then you're trying to determine who are the major players so that you can do sales to them. And then, of course, I said property management groups. Those are kind of the same as the commercial brokers, but commercial brokers might be just engaging the tenants themselves, whereas a property management group might be running the whole building and all the tenants inside of it. So it might be multifaceted for them. To be honest, um, you are going to have to take the time, as I keep saying, knowing the players. I can't express that enough. Um, you have to understand how everybody fits into the process. Okay, so if you have someone who is buying something, you have to know, okay, they just bought something, but they also have a portfolio, so they might be doing something soon. If they have a portfolio, that means that I can do inspections on their existing portfolio. I can do inspections as they sell. I can do inspections as they buy, right? 3 things I can do for a portfolio owner. If they're just a small business owner, I can do their initial purchase. I can do their annual inspections to make sure things are in good condition. I can evaluate all their maintenance records to make sure that they're doing the right thing. That could be a lane you want to go down. What I'm trying to say is, because everyone's in a different process, right? A real estate attorney is going to come into the process differently than where the broker agent's going to come in, or the person buying or selling the property, or the insurance group, or whatever that's going to look like. And we'll learn more about those tomorrow. Um, Understand all the players associated with what you want to do and then learn them really well. I'm going to recommend that everybody here, some of you are already moving through, like, Mr. Dunn is already moving through areas and he has a good firm grasp on kind of where he wants to go. Some of you are newer. Okay. So I really, really recommend, and I said this in my proposal class, I believe, but I recommend that you look in your area, in your immediate area that you want to work in, and determine three different Jeff, I see you said something. I'll get to that in a second. Three different building types or client types in your area that are prevalent, and really figure out how to do them well and start learning and growing in that area. You'll get due diligence inspections, like I said; those are just going to come up just because they're just going to happen. People are buying and selling; they're going to find you on Google. But if you position yourself as the expert on, say, a church, right, and then you start pushing yourself out there as such, they will find you, and you will find them, and sales will be easier. It's all about understanding the conversation and the client. Tenant needs to have a solid understanding of the stark difference between repair and maintenance, where onus of responsibilities for each tenant LL and what the lease defines. Too often, this area is vague or one sided and leads to dysfunction and high costs. Example, a leak from above could be HVAC or roof repair item or lack of meaningful maintenance. Understanding the caliber and quality of LLC's chosen vendors is equally important and should be factored in. Yep, I agree with that, Jeff, 100%. Um, it's true that here's the thing, when you're reviewing a lease agreement, okay, there is going to be some probably vague nature to that. That's very possible, where they're trying to explain it in just a way that the owner skirts some responsibility and it kind of tiptoes on the line. Um, what's going to be important is either there's already going to be possible a property management group involved that can help you review that lease. And if you're reviewing leases and there is no property management group involved, so for example, I have done it where someone is buying a building, it already has lease tenants in it, and they are saying, hey, I know there's a property management group, but they don't do a good job. I've heard poor things about them. I would like for you to be my eyes and review these things and then let me know what you think. I can do that for them, but I've already built relationships with two or three other property management groups that I can take those leases and give back to and say, hey, would you review these leases for me? I'll pay you to review these leases. And this will also set you up for a possible referral as the new property management group, as I know for a fact that they're looking for one. Right. So scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You're my referral partner situation. So it doesn't mean that you know how to review these things. You just need to have referral partners that can help you accomplish it. So if somebody, because there's been times they say, yeah, review all our leases for me. Great. I never look at the leases. I send them all over to another property management group. That's my main referral for my new buyer. And I'll have them go through everything. I'll pay it. And they give me a condensed list of here's what the tenant's responsible for, here's what the landlord's responsible for. And that's what I go off of in my inspection. I can do that too. I can go either or. It just depends on how much you charge and what your knowledge skill set is. Um, but Jeff made a really good point. Are there any other questions regarding lease tenants or anything of that nature? This is one where you may not have a lot of questions about because this is something that a lot of you have never dealt with. And so the questions may come after you actually do it. Um, those who've worked in property management, it might be different. Michelle, if I pick on you for a second, would you share experience what you had? Because I know you did some property management. What did it look like when you guys did inspections? Did you ever have third party inspections or anything like that? Would you have any interest to share that? All right. I have allowed you to talk. If you want to unmute yourself, why don't you tell us who you are and kind of your background a little bit and maybe give an example of where that would have come into play?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Michelle Odoms out of Northern Virginia and just starting up as a commercial inspector, but prior to that, owned a commercial and residential property management company for 15 years. And I definitely saw in my experience that on the commercial side, that small office buildings and retail establishments were not doing anything systematic about annual or quarterly inspections. They were pretty much waiting for a problem to happen and then reacting to that. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in what you've been discussing today about contacting organizations that manage or own small commercial or office establishments to help them understand the importance of preventative maintenance inspections.
When you had your company, did you work with a third party group that would kind of do inspections and maintenance overviews? So you guys had punch list, or did you try to do all that in house with a select group of individuals?
We did the inspect for the commercial sites that we managed, we did our inspections in-house.
Okay.
We just noticed that how we managed our properties was very different than how all of the other properties around us were being managed.
What would be an example of that? You mean just the maintenance wise or how proactive you are? What would be an example?
Just noticeable differences. So, like, there's a kind of a main street of commercial properties that you can drive through in our town, and you can drive through at night and see many lights out or lights blinking.
Hmm.
We were very proactive about doing nighttime inspections. Um, we were proactive about at doing nighttime inspections, not just checking for lights, but checking for abandoned cars and having them towed.
Hmm.
Whereas you could go into other supermarket parking lots, retail strip parking lots, and just seeing obviously abandoned or junked cars that are left there over time and obviously not being inspected on a regular basis so that those things are happening, or condition of the parking lots, condition of the trash enclosures, just things like that, that we made sure ours were always giving a good impression to the customers that were coming into our managed areas,
Hmm.
or we could see in other locations around town that that's just not the case.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, I knew her perspective would be just helpful, or at least to see, because what you'll have is you may have individuals, similar to Michelle's group, that really try to do a great job on maintenance and just keeping an eye on really everything that's possible. And then you'll have some that are extremely reactionary. Um, and you may have trouble getting in with them too because they are so far behind. Not only can they not afford your inspection, but they can't afford the repairs that you're going to provide them. So you have to understand that just because you find a really old rundown shopping center and you think, wow, they would really benefit from my inspection services. Yes, they would benefit from your inspection services. However, it's important to note that if you don't think they have the capital, nor can they actually fix anything, then it might be a moot point to try to reach out to them. Still do so, but don't expect if you're going to get a lot of responses on those individuals. Um, I have found if I am reaching out to any sort of clientele out of these three right now, because tomorrow we're going to go over a new set of clients, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, Out of the three that we talked about today, actual building owners, attorneys, um, brokers who do property management, those are the ones I work a lot with from the three today. So it is easy for me to say, okay, because you could go again. I don't want to toot our horn. I want to pedestal my beautiful wife. She actually created our website and all of our design and SEO. She was amazing on it. Focusbuildinginspections.com. If anything, I just want to show off our wonderful work. But um, apart from that, the reason for the conversation is that we took the time to really blog and put things together for churches and schools. And so I feel really confident in inspecting a church property, talking to the board, talking to the controller, talking to the maintenance, right, the pastor, all of that, and understanding their financial needs for the repairs. Um, and it's really easy for me to just send them emails and call them and follow up with that. Not so much necessarily like lease tenants, right? Like that is something I have done and I do them, but I have found that they will find me organically more than I will trying to do hard sales to them. But it is possible because we have done that and we have had some success in it. Um, Honestly, you're like I said, buying and selling properties, that's going to be low hanging fruit. People are going to just call you regardless. If you're listed online and they're looking for someone to buy or listen to someone inspecting a property, then that's going to be you. Um, Hopefully, if you're found. But really paying attention and going after current building owners is going to be a massive change for some of you in thinking. But if you can curate the best sales process and reach out to them, then you will be successful. So the way that you're going to do that, based on how we had our conversation today, right, is you want to understand that client and understand their needs. That may look like having to do research. That may look like just having to go to your local church or your local school and talking to the superintendent and saying, hey, this is something I offer. I would just love to pick your brain on the process. People will be more willing to do that than you would think. Just be brave enough to ask them. Understand your client, and then you need to curate specific sales oriented goals for them. So you're going to say, okay, with a school, I know life safety, accessibility, I know major issues like parking, HVAC, things of that nature. And I know there are certain board members I have to talk to. I have to correlate all those things so that I can make a good sales package. And then once you have that kind of figured out how you're going to give that information to them, then just drop it on them ever so slightly through an email and keep working on it. Now, obviously, if you see them in person or you see them at an event, you want to give them a card, you want to talk to them, vice versa, you want to strike those conversations up. But email campaigns can be very successful if done correctly. You can do a straight up phone call first, but I find that if you send them some sort of data, that they can look at. Whether they look at it or not is beside the point. They have something tangible now, right? Okay, Lance sent me an email. I have everything in it that he tells me he wants to do. I may or may not respond to it. If you have a process or if you have a any sort of technology like Constant Contact or something where you can send out an email and it tells you if they read it or not, that's even better. But now, maybe on Monday, I sent those emails out. On Friday, I'm going to have someone on my team or myself. This is where having a team is helpful. I'm going to call them. I'm going to say, "Hey, Larry, I sent out something to you on Monday depicting your building's maintenance needs. I wonder if you received that or not, right?" And that's the next conversation. They either say yes or no. You see what that goes, and then if they say no, then no problem. At least ask their permission if you can send them more information specific to their building type for maintenance. So even if like, hey, even if you have a maintenance group and even if you don't need me, I create content for building types like yours. Can I send you an email in a couple of months that just maybe goes over some of the things and it's just education? Oftentimes they'll say, sure, I'll let you do that. So now I have them in a drip campaign, right? So maybe every couple months I'll send them something like that. And then it's, hey, Larry, I know we spoke 3 months ago. I sent you over some stuff. I hope you're able to review that. That's it. Or hey, can I get you a cup of coffee and talk about your building needs so that in the future I can at least help you determine if your current maintenance program is working or whatever that looks like, right? Because we're not offering them a maintenance program. We're trying to do the inspection to help them help their maintenance department. We're not trying to replace their maintenance department. So sometimes people think you're trying to replace what they already have in position and you're just supplementing and you're acting as the advisor. So usually, email campaigns and phone calls work the best, but honestly, if you can insert yourself in as many places as possible, it's going to be to your benefit. That's why I tell people to pick lanes because you will pull your hair out if you have any. I don't anymore. Um, Joining anything and everything and just being busy all the time because you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to be busy. So if you just pick certain lanes and stay in them, you'll be successful. I guarantee it. Blogging appears to be more Elder Sam, said blogging appears to be of importance for obtaining some contact from future clients. What is a suggestion if you've not done any inspections for your intended inspection types for blogging material? So this is something that um, I have told people, and it came straight from my wife's mouth, and that is if you don't have anything to blog about, and let's say you really haven't done any inspections, then I would look in your area and I would find, 5 to 10 different building types. And I would see if you can offer them an inspection for a discounted rate. Okay. So you already know what type of building types they are. Remember, I told you to go look for those building types and those kind of clients, kind of build up a little bit of confidence in how you want to sell to them. And then I would certainly recommend reaching out and saying, hey, I'm starting a new program, right? Or I'm starting a new inspection process. And I think your building would be perfect for me to offer this to. Can I give it to you at this discounted rate? And what that's going to allow is going to allow you to do the inspection and understand your process and your reporting process. But then it's going to give you something to blog about. Because then you said, last month we did an inspection on a church, and this is what we found. Normally churches need this, blah, 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 blah. So that's usually what you need. Or honestly, if even if you haven't done an inspection yet and you know there's several different types of building types in your area and client types, then just do some basic research on them. You can even dump that stuff into, say, ChatGPT and say, hey, I have these building types around me. What type of issues often happen with these type of buildings? And then blah blah blah, you have a few things there, and then you can write and blog about that as well. So it doesn't have to be where you've actually done the inspection to blog on something. There's plenty of things for it. Because if I really want to go after churches, and I know that churches often struggle with big cost items like roofs, parking lot, large HVAC systems, because a lot of those are just big open spaces, right? They've got big HVAC systems. Then I can do research and see, okay, what do they need to be doing to maintain their HVAC systems well? And then that could be a drip campaign email, right? 10 things you need to pay attention to with your HVAC systems this fall, whatever that looks like. And you could send it to them. The purpose of this is to be getting information to their hands in a consistent manner. It may not yield any work in that interim, but you were at the forefront of their mind. And as you start to create and cultivate more of a relationship with them, and they start to see, again, using the term thought leader, and they go, okay, Focus Building Inspections really understands our building type and how we run business. At some point down the road, when you revisit them and say, hey, last year I sent a proposal over to you, thought this would be a good process for you. We're in fourth quarter now. I know everyone's getting ready for next year. What would be an opportunity for us to provide that offering for you now? Often, because they've already spoken to you and they've gotten this stuff from you, they will feel more confident in letting you provide a service for them. And sometimes it may just be they don't have the money. Money is always a conversation, and money is not a conversation you should run away from. If you take my pricing and proposal conversation or class, you'll know that I talk about when you put prices together, you never want to reduce your fee in a way that looks like you are taking value away from yourself. So if they say 2,000 doesn't work, Lance, can you do 1,000? You say, yeah, I guess I'll knock it down to 1,000. No, you say, I can offer you for 1,000, but I'm going to change my offering so that it matches the fee I'm going to charge you, because my $2,000 offering was that exact value I gave you, but I can lower it so I can give you a different value of something else. So it may be where you gave them a $5,000 proposal in January, they didn't accept it, they appreciated you, they said, yeah, you can keep talking to me. And then over the rest of the year, you give them a drip campaign, a couple of emails here and there, whatever it looks like. And then fourth quarter, you call back out and say, hey, what are your interests in doing that again now, talking about fourth quarter budgets? And then they may say, yeah, but when you gave it to me back in January, it's $5,000. To be honest, it does sound interesting, but $5,000's way too much. And you say, okay, what's your budget? We could do two. Awesome. Let me see what I can do for you at $2,000. And you can do it that way. I know I told you guys that I had a report that I would give you as a sample. I'm going to have to pull that up separately. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I have everybody's email, and I will send you either a sample report, or I will put it in the material that you already get for the post class on the LMS. But most likely I'll send you an email with that in it. And it's nothing fancy. It's just telling you how I would, construct the first 10 pages of my report. After that, you can kind of do however you want to do it. All the different report writers will allow you to get something similar, but there's a reason why people are using Word for like engineering groups and contracting groups, is because you can deliver data in a way that some of these report writing softwares can't right now. But I have worked and talked to several report writing softwares, and they're all very interested in making it work. So I feel very hopeful this year that if this not this year, early next year, we'll have some great resources for us to work with. So I'll sit still for a second, see if anyone has any questions about any of these client types. If you have any question about marketing and sales, anything about your presence or groups that you can network with, I am wide open. As we've kind of wrapped up the beginning or the end of our class here with the last 15 minutes, I want to give you time to ask any questions or share anything that you would like. So I'm going to sit back and let you guys do that. Michelle, that is a great question. So I will take a second and explain what tomorrow's going to cover because it's going to go right over that. So tomorrow we are going to cover financial institutions and the different types of financial institutions that you would be doing inspections for, which are going to be banks, credit unions, hard money lenders, mortgage brokers, etc. And then we are going to discuss insurance providers. So we're going to talk about, underwriters and loss control groups and risk management and other self-insured companies. And then we will finish up with government and public agencies. So municipalities, school districts, housing authorities, DOT, state and federal agencies. Michael, I know, has done programs where he has gotten on government websites and offered services to them. So we will break those things down too. These are going to be more of the not so common groups of individuals that you can do inspections for, but there are still a multitude of opportunity to get work from them. So that's a good question, Michelle. The answer is yes. We will go into it in detail. So Sam said, while doing large property inspections solo, how do you determine the amount of time you will spend on property? That is a great question. So when I first started solo, I had no idea, to be honest. You just you kind of just try to figure out your way about it. What I have done successfully over the years as a solo inspector is not so much my in-person inspection, success and skills. It's I've learned to better communicate with my client and their needs. Okay. So a lot of people want to ask, okay, well, if you're going to go do a hotel, right? And they want you to go into 50% of the rooms and then look at all the common areas, pools, exterior, roof, structure, all that, right? That's a lot of stuff to cover. But if my client wants me to look at 10 rooms, exclude the pool, don't look at the roof because they already had it, just walk the outside parking lot, look at 10 rooms and look at the entryway, then that makes for a very small inspection compared to the whole package. What I believe new inspectors are having trouble with is you are seeing the building as a whole and you're trying to determine how long is it going to take me to do that inspection. And what you need to determine is what will your client's needs be and then curate your inspection time based on that. So for example, if I'm doing a cost to cure report, I'm no longer doing an inspection in a way that is, oh, I found a fire extinguisher, it's outdated. I'm going to put in my report the fire extinguisher is outdated and move on. Now, if I'm doing a cost to cure report, right, I'm trying to give them exact costs or I'm trying to give them immediate and long term projection costs. Then I need to find every single fire extinguisher in that building and determine when it was inspected. Because the comment of they're outdated, they need to be inspected, opposed to there were 25 of them and it costs $150 a year to have them inspected. It's this much money, right? Now my inspection looks different in the field. I personally inspect as much data and collect as much as I can while I'm in the field in case I need to use it for whatever reason. So I don't go into the field initially if they want a very basic PCA or inspection and just collect bare minimum and get out of there. I'll take as many pictures and collect as much data as necessary because there are opportunities to upsell after the fact too on, like I said, a maintenance program or maybe a cost to cure report or something of that nature. And you already have the data now, you can write a report that correlates to it. But some things are going to take longer than others. That's just the fact of it. If you're trying to complete the report on site, you're going to be there really long. Honestly, I like to spend as least amount of time on site as possible. The more time I'm there, I feel like I'm taking away from the business, and I can do just as much, if not better, by taking pictures at home and writing a report than I could trying to put everything in the report writing software. That's the one thing that takes everyone too long in the field, honestly, is you're trying to do too much with your report writing software. You're taking too many pictures of the wrong thing, things of that nature. So we will have some training coming up, I know for sure, on how to conduct inspections on different building types, how to do reporting for different building types. So that'll all come and be hopefully helpful to you later. Yes, client concern I think is always the better option than understanding the building size. Quick example of that is a couple. Oh, I think it was last year. The company who owned the building that Amazon was leasing wanted me to do an inspection for them because they were changing ownership. And so you think, oh my gosh, 1 million square foot building for Amazon, that's going to take forever in a team of 20. Yeah, but the client only wanted some bare basic information. So instead of it being a 4 day inspection, I was only there for half a day and the rest of the day was done report writing. So I could look at that from just what it is and go, wow, that's massive. It's going to take forever. But again, like I said, that changes based on your client's needs. I've got just a few more minutes here. So, does anyone else have any other questions they would like addressed regarding the class or anything business related? Okay. No hands raised. Nope. Oh, Mike got me. Okay. Did you cover timeline differences between resi and commercial? Commercial inspection reports quite often have a much larger time window for delivery. Um, I can cover that real quick for you. So, honestly, that also goes into consideration with your client's needs. So, we try to have reports delivered within 48 hours. That's just kind of our goal. Sometimes it takes longer, and I make sure I communicate that with the client. But also, when we have our proposal request form being filled out, we specifically ask when they need the report. Is it ASAP? Is it, within a week? Is it within a month? Is there plenty of flexible time? Because that helps me determine the type of scenario. If they're like, we need it ASAP, that they probably got in under contract and they only have a 30-day due diligence period, and so they have to move it quickly. Compared to, yeah, we're buying this property, but it's going to take us months to get through the process. There's no hurry. It doesn't mean I want to deliver it later. It just means that I have some more flexibility in case something comes up. Um, Here's the deal, and this will probably get me in trouble, so I'm going to be very careful saying it, and I don't mean it to be crass at all. There was an unnecessary expectation of immediacy in residential that was created by realtors and inspectors, where everyone had to be same day done. If this isn't done the time I leave the parking lot, I have failed you, and every other company who doesn't give you same day whatever. In commercial, it's not that way. There is no unnecessary sense of urgency in commercial. If there is, they will tell you. But honestly, a lot of commercial is hurry up and wait. And for example, they may be like, give me that proposal immediately. You get them a proposal and they don't reach back out for 2 weeks. Um, so with report writing for commercial, just know there is no urgency. There's not even an urgency to get your proposal back to them that very second. Oftentimes, we might get a call or something or an email and they say, hey, I would love to get a proposal on this property. And I say, great, go fill out the proposal request form or I'll fill it out with them. And I'll say, I will have you a proposal back within 24 hours. And I tell them that it might take that long because I need to do research on the property, right? I need to look up some different things that may correlate to the property's past or what they're trying to do to the property. So if they say, "Yeah, I'm going to take that property and change how I use it," right? That may change how I do some research on putting the proposal together. So I can't immediately turn around necessarily and crank out a same day proposal. Um, as long as you establish the expectation, then report writing is a fairly simple process and when it gets delivered. But you're right, residential, everything's in a hurry, everything's on fire. Haven't found that to be true in commercial in any aspect. Larry said establishing expectations in the amount of detail expected and the due date should be established in your initial discussion saves you a lot of frustration for you and the client. Larry, absolutely. That's what I talked about earlier. And if you were in my pricing proposal class, anybody they would hear that straight from me. The process is always the same. The process has to be even if they call you and they want a price immediately, we try not give prices over the phone. Everyone has to have a proposal request form filled out on our website, whether they fill it out or I fill it out for them on the conversation. And then once I have that initial proposal request, that gives me a baseline for how I'm going to have a conversation with them after the fact. So let's say I got my proposal request completed. Now I go, okay, I know what type of client they are. I know how they're going to be using this building. I know their urgency with this proposal and the inspection report. But also, I know how to have a conversation so I can say, listen, I see here that you're going to be taking this daycare building and you're going to be stripping it down and turning it into an office. So I see you're going to be repurposing it completely, right? That's going to change how I do the inspection for you. What's going to be important for you in this inspection? I see here that you're really interested in accessibility, you're really interested in a cost to cure report, and you're really interested in the roof because they've been having a lot of roofing issues. Are the other areas of the building important to you? Do you even want those things inspected? They can go through that process with you and then determine their threshold, their financial threshold, right? So if they don't care about anything under 2 grand, that may change how you do your report and findings. It still doesn't mean I won't take a picture of something, but if they don't care about it, I'm not going to put it in their report, and it's not going to go in their cost to cure report either, right? That helps me with that starting line. So Larry's right. A lot of frustration goes away when you have proper conversations with your clients. And if you are coming from residential, that's hard, right? Because someone's going to schedule it, likely the real estate professional, and you'll never really get to talk to your client. And then when you get in the field, you may get to talk to them a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of build up to it and a lot of client trust and understanding before the inspection started. And a lot of people get confused and they get frustrated when they get a home inspection report after the fact because they feel like you didn't deliver what you were supposed to. What level of informational items do you include in your reports? I understand the expectations discussion, but as a standard in your report, what do you include as informational, not just deficiencies? Um, I like to take my reporting to how would I say it? It's more of an informational and excuse me. It's more of an informational and overview report anyway. So instead of just having tick boxes where I'm like, the HVAC system is split, it's 2008, it's a carrier, whatever. I try to explain things in my reporting. So it might be you have a 4,000 square foot building. It's essentially zoned in 3 different areas. So you have split systems, you have rooftop units, and you have air handlers over on this side of the building. I may draw an outline and say this, it's being cooled and heated from this different area. This side of the building, everything was manufactured in 2009 per the installation of the units, and also when they added on to the property. Whatever. I try to paint a picture. I don't. I don't want to be so verbose like it's an engineering report, but I also want to be very informational. So I'm explaining the roof, I'm explaining MEP, I'm explaining structure, I'm explaining, life safety and accessibility. I'm doing an accessibility survey. We have it on section 15 of the ComSop. I'm over explaining some of those things because what I find is most of my clients may want just a very simple inspection, but a lot of them really need to understand what their building entails because they don't know anything about buildings, right? That little dentist doesn't know crap about buildings, but they want to be a really good dentist, and that's what they should focus on. So, again, being an advisor, you're going to give them information that's going to help them explain the building, how it operates, within the adequate amount of detail that you feel comfortable providing and what you actually know to be true. I wouldn't just go on ChatGPT and just say, hey, make this comment really verbose and make me sound professional, because that's not going to be helpful at all. But I try to explain things within reason. Um, this has been great information. Thank you. Looking forward to tomorrow's continued course. Yes, we are at the end of it. Thank you for that quick notice. Tomorrow morning, same time, we are going to go over those 3 individuals, and those are going to take quite a bit. We'll probably go all 4 hours, especially on those, because those are going to have quite a bit to cover. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate everybody. We're going to end this here. If you do have questions, think about them this evening and come find me tomorrow morning, and we will go over those questions together. So have a wonderful evening, and we will talk soon.